434. Writing with a runny nose, I feel a bit uncomfortable. When he arrived at the Verdant Gorge Island, Chen Pingan went to the sword room to retrieve the reply letter that Wei Ba had sent from the cloud padding mountain. The flying sword flashed and disappeared, returning to the Longquan County of Great Li. After parting ways with Jiyu Kan, Chen Pingan went to the room at the entrance of the mountain alone. He opened the secret letter and saw that it was a reply to Chen Pingan's questions. As expected of Wei Ba, he answered 3 of the questions that Chen Pingan had asked the gentleman Zhong Kuei and the old Fan Junmao of Dragon City. The letter was filled with more than 10,000 words. It explained the rules of the separation of yin and yang, how a person could become an otherworldly item after death, the reason and opportunity of reincarnation, the many complicated procedures that involved the 2 forbidden lands of Fengju and Hell, the deviation of the entrance to the Yellow Springs Road caused by the local customs of various places, the difference between ghost servants, and so on. It explained everything in detail to Chen Pingan. At the end of the secret letter, Wei Pai added 2 secret techniques that he had written himself. One of them was a heretical technique that Wei Pai had collected in the royal family of Holy Water Country. It used the essence of water between heaven and earth to quickly find the light of the true spirit, condense the scattered souls, and reconstruct the soul. After this technique was completed, it could be used to order all ghosts near water. Therefore, it was a secret technique of Holy Water Country that only the imperial tutor and the consecrated immortal masters could study. The other secret technique was a heretical Taoist technique that Wei Pai had inadvertently obtained from the armory of Holy Water Country. This technique was similar to witchcraft, but it was mixed with some sword techniques of the ancient Shu kingdom. It was used to break the barrier between yin and yang, and use the area where the sword light reached as a bridge and a path to connect the world of the living and the underworld to communicate with the deceased ancestors. However, it needed to find a living person who was born with a strong yin qi as the resting place for the otherworldly item to return to the world of the living. This person was called Xingting by Wei Pai in the secret letter. It had to be a person with a strong ancestral yin qi or a cultivation genius who was born with a good talent to cultivate ghost techniques. The latter was the best. After all, the former would damage the ancestral yin qi, while the latter could use it to cultivate and turn a disaster into a blessing. Chen Pingan repeatedly browsed through the secret letter from Cloud Mountain. What the bookkeeper didn't know was that the Verdant Gorge Island would soon be exposed after the 2 battles in the Yellow Moon Island and the Cloud Tower City. Now, the Book Lake was abuzz with the news that there was a young foreign consecrator in the Verdant Gorge Island with amazing combat capability. Not only did he have 2 talisman divine puppets that could easily kill a 7th realm sword cultivator, but he also had 2 natal flying swords. The most terrifying thing was that he was also proficient in close combat. He had once killed a 6th realm military cultivator with 1 punch. Talisman Immortal Master, Earth Immortal Sword Cultivator, and Martial Arts Grandmaster? What was the background of this bookkeeper of the Verdant Canyon Island? For a time, Liu Jimao's momentum on Gong Willow Island skyrocketed, and many fence-sitters began to flock to Verdant Gorge Island. At the Spring Court Manor, a woman said to Jiyu Kan, who rarely came home for dinner, Kan, don't learn from Chen Pingan. Jiyu Kan was wolfing down his food. He said vaguely, no, of course I won't. The woman smiled with relief. She picked up a silk handkerchief and wiped the oil stains on the corner of her son's mouth. She said in a low voice, Chen Pingan is such a good man. I liked him very much. But in the Book Lake, good people don't live long, but scourges live for thousands of years. It's not a bad saying. Although I have never left the Spring Court Manor to see the outside world, I have chatted with the maids every day. I know the difference between the Book Lake and the Mud Bottle Alley better than Chen Pingan. Jiyu Kan nodded and said, Mother, don't worry. I know. There is only one Chen Pingan in the world. I can't learn from him. I don't look like him. Finally, Jiyu Kan raised his head and said, what's more, there is only one Jiyu Kan in the world. The woman suddenly asked, previously, Mother only knew that Chen Pingan had a great future, but as for the details, Chen Pingan didn't say, so Mother didn't ask too much. Now, listening to the private conversations of the young ladies in the mansion, It seems that Chen Pingan can even occupy a large island in the calligraphy lake with more than enough to spare. I heard that even Elvide Saisang was almost killed by Chen Pingan that night. Ji Yukan thought for a moment and said, I'm not sure. I only know that the half-immortal weapon is called Sword Immortal. According to Liu Zhimao, it seems that Chen Pingan can't fully control it for the time being. Otherwise, none of the Earth Immortals of the Gold Core realm in the Book Lake could withstand more than 3 moves from Chen Pingan. Those below the Earth Immortal realm can certainly be killed with 1 move. However, compared to this half-refined Sword Immortal, Liu Zhimao was obviously more afraid of that talisman of Chen Pingan. He asked me if I knew the origin of this talisman, and I said I didn't. It was most likely one of Chen Pingan's trump cards. In fact, Little Loach was arranged by me to follow Chen Pingan at that time, in case any accident happened and some blind people spoiled Chen Pingan's mood when he was traveling around the Scroll Lake. Therefore, Little Loach witnessed the divine abilities of the 2 heavenly soldiers and immortal generals. Little Loach said that they seemed to be different from the immortal talismans and Taoist talismans of the Talisman Puppet sect. What was contained in the talisman gallbladder was not a bit of spiritual light, but the golden body of the god of mountains and rivers. The woman sighed and said, so Chen Pingan is already so promising. Ji Yukan's table manners were not good, and now her face was greasy. She tilted her head and said with a smile, yes, as long as Chen Pingan wants to do something, he can do it. It has always been like this. What's so strange about it? The woman looked at her son's innocent face and felt a little helpless. There were some things that a mother had to think more about. It had nothing to do with her ability as a woman. When Little Loach and Little Loach went to the palace hall, she went to the backyard of the palace hall. When Ji Yukan brought Little Loach to Gong Willow Island to join in the fun, the woman came to a hall in the backyard of the mansion of Chunting. She gathered the dozens of ladies in the mansion together and lectured them harshly. She forbade anyone from gossiping in front of Chen Pingan. Once they were discovered, they would be beaten to death. She also ordered people to dig out the secret files of the incense room of Chunting Mansion. If any of their relatives were already cultivators of the verdant Canyon Island, they would immediately ask Lord Tianhu to personally break the Bridge of Longevity. If they were not from the Bookslip Lake but had received gifts from the mansion of Chunting Mansion, they would be confiscated and handed over to the Lord of Pond City, Fan family. In the dusk of this day, Chen Pingan knocked on the door of an ordinary mansion on the verdant Canyon Island. It was the place of cultivation of a second-class minister of offerings. No one knew his real name. His surname was Ma, and he was a ghost cultivator. It was said that he used to be a packman for the royal family of a destroyed country. He was one of the handymen in the archives of the capital city when the emperor went on a tour. No one knew how he became a cultivator and gradually became a senior minister of offerings on the verdant Canyon Island. Among the wild cultivators who were looked down upon by the immortal master of archives, ghost cultivators were one of the most unpopular ones. Therefore, this mansion was located in a remote and secluded area of the verdant Canyon Island. The spiritual qi was not abundant, but it was full of yin qi. It occupied a strange well where yin qi would blow every once in a while. The mansion was surrounded by yin qi all year round, and there was no contact between the neighbors. This ghost cultivator was originally the last among the top ministers of offerings on the verdant Canyon Island. As the verdant Canyon Island annexed more than a dozen large islands belonging to the vassal states, some big island owners and ministers of offerings cherished their lives and chose to rely on immortal Jie Jiang, who was at the peak of his power. As time went by, the original power of the verdant Canyon Island was constantly pushed back. Fortunately, Liu Zhimao did not deduct the meritorious service of the ministers of offerings. Instead, he increased their salaries by 10 to 20%, which did not disappoint the soldiers. The gatekeeper was a skinny old woman who was full of stench. However, she had a head of black hair and snow-white eyes. When she saw the bookkeeper surnamed Chen, the old woman immediately squeezed out a flattering smile. Between the wrinkles on her shriveled face, tiny living things such as mosquitoes, flies, and maggots rustled and fell. The old woman was still a little shy. She secretly twisted the toe of her embroidered shoes on the ground. As a result, there was a crackling sound, which was not scary, but disgusting. The old woman also noticed this. Her face flushed with shame. Her lips moved slightly, but she could not say a word. Chen Pinggan looked calm. He recognized that the old woman with thin yang qi and spirituality in front of him was actually a woman in her early 20s. All women in the world loved beauty. She shook the string of bells beside the door and said to Chen Pinggan, "My master will be here soon. I'll have to trouble Mr. Chen to wait for a moment." She hesitated for a moment and pointed to a dark room next to the mansion's main entrance. "I won't be an eyesore here. Mr. Chen, if you have something to do, just call me and I'll be in the side room. I'll appear immediately." Chen Pinggan nodded and asked, "May I ask how I should address the young madam? I may have to visit your mansion often in the future. It's not good to feed you every time." The repulsive old woman was stunned for a moment. She did not dare to look at the young man in front of her with her current face. She turned her head and said softly, "Mr. Chen, you can call me Hong Xiu." A cloud of black smoke rolled over. After it stopped, a short man appeared. Black smoke was still coming out from the bottom of his robe and his two big sleeves. The man had a wooden expression and frowned at the old woman. "You don't know what's good for you. You have the face to stand here and chat with Mr. Chen. Hurry up and go back to the house. Aren't you afraid of dirtying Mr. Chen's eyes?" She quickly hid in the side room and stood near the small window. She did not even have the courage to take a look. She only hoped to listen to the conversation between the two parties. As the verdant Canyon Island became more and more prosperous, the master of the house had been demoted from the first class to the bottom of the second class. In addition, the verdant Canyon Island continued to build new mansions, and the 11 surrounding islands were included in the jurisdiction of the verdant Canyon Island. In the past year or so, it was rare for guests to visit the mansion. Familiar cultivators had already gone to other places, and strange cultivators were not willing to come here. She guarded the mansion door day and night, and the servants were forbidden to talk inside and outside the mansion. Therefore, even the chirping of birds inadvertently flying over the mansion door could make her think about it for a long time. After entering the mansion, Chen Pinggan explained the purpose of his visit to Gui Xiu. Gui Xiu with the surname Ma was silent. He was faintly unhappy. This accountant who was now famous in Bookslip Lake was a little too much. He actually came to visit him to ask for the remaining souls that he had picked up in the past. These demons and monsters that he had imprisoned in the soul-summoning banner and the well were already one of his great dows. Among them, there were more than 10 demons and monsters that had the cultivation of the middle 5 states before they were born. They were refined into ghost generals by him. Now, each of them had their own duties. Even if the young man said that he was willing to buy them with immortal money, was this a matter of money? "You, Chen, really don't know the rules of the Tao, or did you plan to bully people from the beginning? You have the ability to slap the little devil Jiu Kan twice, right? Why don't you go and ask Jiu Kan how much immortal money you need to buy the life of that woman from Chunting Mansion? Let's see if Jiu Kan will agree to it." Even though the more he thought about it, the angrier he became. Gui Xiu with the surname Ma still did not dare to fall out with him. If this mysterious accountant really wanted to stab him to death, it would not be a big deal. Would immortal Jie Jiang be willing to seek justice from his little disciple Jiu Kan and this young sword immortal in front of him for the sake of a dead second-rate immortal master? However, Gui Xiu was also a stubborn person. He retorted. It was true that he was a ghost cultivator who captured souls, but the one who really benefited the most was not him. Instead, it was Yu Hui who called himself the Ghost King of the mountains and lakes on Moonhook Island, one of the vassal islands. As the top warrior under the command of the Lord of Moonhook Island, not only was he the first to betray Moonhook Island, but he also followed immortal Jie Jiang and Jiu Kan. Every time a battle ended, he would be responsible for cleaning up the mess. Now, immortal My Island, White Scale Island, and many other vassal islands that were occupied by Lord Tianhu, most of the souls of those who died in battle had been divided between him and another Earth Immortal Master from the Yin-Yang School who was currently in charge of Jade Pot Island. He did not even have the chance to get a share. He could only spend money to buy some demons with strong yin chi and strong backbone from the 2 top Immortal Masters of Green Gorge Island. There was no business deal in the world that could not be negotiated. In the end, It all depended on whether the person who paid was sincere enough and whether the person who paid was ruthless enough. In the end, the ghost cultivator said that since Mr. Chen gave the price according to the realm of the otherworldly items and souls, it was fair. However, it was an important matter related to the great path of the ghost cultivator. It was not a matter of giving face to the ghost cultivator. The ghost cultivator would only agree if Mr. Chen could accomplish one thing. After that, he would have to slowly select the otherworldly items and ghosts in the spirit summoning streamers and the chilling wind well before he could start his business. After Chen Pinggan learned about that matter, he nodded and agreed. When he left the mansion and passed by the gate, Chen Pinggan bade farewell to the old woman who was called Hong Su. When Chen Pinggan returned to the mountain gate of Green Gorge Island, he did not return to his house. Instead, he went to the ferry and rowed the boat to Pearl Hairpin Island. Once again, he saw the owner of the island, Liu Zhongruan, a tall and plump beautiful woman. It turned out that the ghost cultivator surnamed Ma came from the same country as this woman, but there was a world of difference between their identities. One was the aunt of the last emperor, a woman who was so powerful that she almost ascended the throne herself, while the other was a packman in the palace. As for how they knew each other and what happened, Chen Pinggan did not ask in detail. Anyway, the reason why the ghost cultivator turned to Liu Zhimao and chose the Verdant Gorge Island as the place where she set up her mansion was to get close to Liu Zhongruan, the owner of the Pearl Island. Liu Zhongruan, who was praised as manly by Lord Tianhu, originally wanted to make up for her mistake today. However, because she did not know the cultivation level of the accountant in front of her, she refused Chen Pinggan's visit out of caution. As a result, Liu Zhongruan regretted it when the result of the battle between Pearl Hairpin Island and Pearl Hairpin Island came out. With this person's unfathomable cultivation, it would not be difficult for him to kill more than half of the people of Pearl Hairpin Island. Therefore, she quickly sent an invitation letter to Green Gorge Island and took the initiative to invite Mr. Chen to visit the Pearl Pavilion of Pearl Hairpin Island. It was a kind of mending the pen after the sheep were lost. She did not want Liu Zhongruan and Pearl Hairpin Island to leave a bad impression on the accountant. However, when Liu Zhongruan heard that Gui Xiu of Green Gorge Island wanted to see her, she immediately turned hostile. Leaving Chen Pinggan aside, she turned to climb the mountain and said coldly, "If Mr. Chen wants to visit Pearl Hairpin Island, I, Liu Zhongruan, will accompany you all the way. If you are going to be a lobbyist for that bastard, please go home immediately." Chen Pinggan had to paddle the boat and leave to find Yu Hui, whose Taoist name was Ghost King of Mountain Lake. He was one of the few great Gui Xiu of Book Lake. His cultivation level was in the Golden Core realm, which was not something that Gui Xiu of Dragon Gate realm could compare with. Now, he occupied the entire Moonhook Island and had the same status as Lord Tianhu. They were both officials under Liu Zhimao's command. Compared to Gui Xiu of Ma, who was not famous, Yu Hui was notorious and was becoming more and more famous in Book Lake. Moonhook Island was a large island with great strength, and the old island master of Golden Core Island was famous for being a tough nut to crack. However, because of Yu Hui's betrayal, he destroyed the mountain lake formation of Moonhook Island, which gave Liu Zhimao and Jiyu Kan's little loach the opportunity to sneak in and attack more than 1,000 cultivators of Moonhook Island. Yu Hui, who was extremely talented, became rich overnight. He collected a large number of souls of cultivators in the middle 5 realms and refined them one by one with a unique secret method. It was said that he was very likely to be the next nascent soul realm cultivator of Book Lake. He also occupied the wives and daughters of the old island master of Moonhook Island. In the past year, he was as happy as an immortal. Even Liu Zhimao once joked about Yu Hui during the celebration banquet on Green Gorge Island, saying that Yu Hui was the one who enjoyed the most in Book Lake. Jiyu Kan even gave him a thumbs up during the celebration party, which made Yu Hui feel proud. He quickly stood up and toasted Jiyu Kan with 3 cups of wine. It must be known that the insufferably arrogant little devil, Jiyu Kan, practically never showed a good face to any of the consecrators. When the ferry reached the shore, Chen Pinggan took out the true body talisman of the day and night wandering god talisman and summoned 2 true god puppets. Just like that, he climbed the mountain. His style of doing things was very scholarly. He was no longer the bookkeeper of the verdant Canyon Island who was polite to everyone. Yu Hui, who had originally wanted to put on airs, was so frightened that he immediately went out to greet the guests. When Yu Hui learned that Mr. Chen, who seemed to be going on a killing spree on Moonhook Island, was only here to buy the souls of insignificant otherworldly items, he felt relieved. Then, he told the accountant about his difficulties. For example, he told the accountant about the deep hatred between him and the old island master of Moonhook Island. He also told him about how he had to endure the humiliation to get back together with a concubine that the old pervert had bullied and humiliated. Chen Pinggan quietly listened to the ghost king of the mountains and lakes' grievances for a while. When Yu Hui felt that he had nothing more to say, Chen Pinggan began to trade yin souls with him. It was unknown whether it was because Yu Hui felt that he had a large business, or because he was more far-sighted and courageous than the ghost cultivator surnamed Ma from the Verdant Gorge Island. He was much easier to negotiate with. Many yin souls and ghosts that were almost depleted of their 3 souls and 7 spirits were directly given to the accountant. If Yu Hui was not a pitiful little cultivator who no longer needed to go to the rural graveyards and unmarked graves to refine his natal item, he would have long refined all of these yin souls. After all, ghost generals and higher-ranked ghost kings all needed to feed on these scattered souls. Chen Pinggan also asked about the talisman's soul-nourishing skills. Yu Hui had been carefully guarding against the 2 puppets behind the young man. He was afraid that they would kill him if he said anything wrong. In the face of these trivial questions, he naturally told him everything he knew. Outside the Cloud Tower, there were dozens of cultivators guarding the 7th Realm Sword cultivators, but they were all killed by the 2 big guys on the spot. Regarding this matter, all the Earth Immortals of the Book Lake, including Yu Hui, had begun to prepare for a rainy day. They racked their brains to come up with a countermeasure. Perhaps there would be a group of island owners on the Gong Willow Island who would join forces to break the situation. Among the tens of thousands of cultivators in the Book Lake, there was always a rule that was regarded as a standard by the cultivators. That was, there was no such thing as an invincible magic weapon. If there was one today, there would be none tomorrow. At the latest, there would be one the day after tomorrow. The law of the sword. Chen Pinggan did not let Yu Hui see him off. When he reached the ferry, he put away the real body talisman of the day and night wandering god that was getting dimmer and dimmer. He hid it in his sleeve and rowed the boat away. The autumn scenery of the Book Lake was charming and gentle. There were more than 1,000 islands, each with 1,000 kinds of autumn scenery. Chen Pinggan was not in a hurry to return to the Verdant Gorge Island. He stopped the ferry on the lake, took off the blade-strengthening gourd and drank a mouthful of wine to refresh himself. Chen Pinggan put away the blade-strengthening gourd and looked around at the lake scenery. The old Mr. Wen Sheng once said that a gentleman's nature was not different. He was good at using things. That was why Chen Pinggan wrote those 3 letters and sent them in 3 directions with his flying sword. He did not hesitate to use the real body talisman of the day and night wandering god without hesitation. He also forced the half-immortal weapon out of its sheath. Chen Pinggan now knew that there was a threshold in the world. If it was too high, he was unwilling to walk in. If it was too low, he did not like to take it seriously. Being neither too high nor too low, picking up and dropping, was never the real principle. In the end, it was still following one's inner view of the world, the vertical and horizontal ridges of one's heart, to conduct oneself in the world. For example, Ji Yu Kan's mother never believed that evil would be repaid with evil. Chen Pinggan always believed that this was the fundamental difference between the two's temperament, which led to a bigger difference in the two's calculation of gains and losses. One valued material objects, while Chen Pinggan was willing to calculate gains and losses in addition to material objects. This had almost nothing to do with what he had experienced when he left his hometown and how many books he knew. If one were to delve deeper, it would involve a person's most simple view of the world, and it would involve Imperial Tutor Quiche's so-called one. Chen Pinggan had actually thought of this step before, but he chose to stop and turn back. It was useless to think too much. All the fundamental cognition that determined a person's nature and behavior, whether it was broad or narrow, big or small, right or wrong, thick or thin, all fell on the word line. It was a competition of martial arts. Chen Pinggan now had no choice but to stop practicing his fists and put aside his sword. He did not even think about the important future of the promise of 10 years and the promise of 60 years. Naturally, he had a lot of time to calm down and think about things. When he looked at the scroll lake again, he thought more and saw further than when he stood on the railing of the Xiang prefecture in Huangting country. For example, Chen Pinggan could be sure that the scroll lake was a place that military strategists would fight for. Before the Dali cavalry went south, it was a place outside the law for mountain and swamp cultivators to take refuge. It was a place of little value in the eyes of the Zhuiying dynasty. Now that the balance had been broken, it was bound to usher in a world-shaking change. Chen Pinggan was also waiting. Whether it was the Zhuiying dynasty that occupied the Scroll Lake, or the Dali cavalry at the northernmost tip of the Aquarius continent that took over the Scroll Lake, or the Lakeview Academy that mediated between them, a new delicate balance would appear if they did not want to see one party dominate. There would be signs that the law of one country was enough to cover the customs of another country. On the Willow Palace Island, they still quarreled with each other every day. This was an extremely rare scene at the Scroll Lake. In the past, there was no need to talk. They would have already used their magic weapons to see who was better. Since it was an alliance between the island masters, there were still rules to be followed. Ji Yukan, Lu Caisang and Yuan Yuan did not show up at the Mountain Wealth Hall. Although most of the island masters saw them, they would greet them with a smile. They might even call the three little brats brothers, and they would not feel ashamed. During this period of time, Gong Willow Island was overcrowded with people. Most of them were the trusted aides and confidants of each island master. After the female cultivator who was the previous ruler of Bookslip Lake suddenly died on the way out, Gong Willow Island, which was originally under her care, had not been taken care of for more than 200 years. Only a few old wild cultivators who were still sentimental would occasionally send people to clean up Gong Willow Island. Otherwise, Gong Willow Island would have long become a dilapidated ruin overgrown with weeds and foxes and rabbits. The old island master of the Willow Palace Island was the only upper 5 territories wild cultivator in the Aquarius continent, Liu Larocheng. He was born in a small broken place called Tail Ferry in the southeast of the Aquarius continent. He formed his gold core in a small immortal sect, hanging on a plank road between 2 mountains. He was famous in the Scroll Lake. When Liu Larocheng reached the upper 5 territories, he should have been able to establish a sect according to the mountain etiquette set by the Confucian Academy. However, Liu Larocheng only pushed a female cultivator of the Scroll Lake who was close to him to the throne. He left the Scroll Lake and did not have a fixed residence. He traveled around and did not send any news back to the Scroll Lake. This made the Scroll Lake, which finally had a chance to unify, continue to maintain the chaotic situation of the warlords. This led to the rapid rise of Liu Zhimao and the Verdant Gorge Island, allowing Ji Yukan, a lawless little brat, to overturn the Scroll Lake. In the winter, Chen Pinggan began to frequently visit the Ghost Cultivator's mansion in the Verdant Gorge Island, the Pearl Pavilion in the Pearl Hairpin Island, and the Moonhook Islands Yu Hui and the Great Cultivator of the Yin-Yang School. Just when Chen Pinggan felt that the quarrel in the Willow Palace Island was about to end, a shocking change occurred in the Scroll Lake's Furong Mountain. The Furong Mountain Island master's cultivation was not high. The Furong Mountain had always been a small island attached to the Heavenly Granny Island, and the Heavenly Granny Island was one of the big islands that opposed Liu Zhimao becoming the Lord of Jianghu. It was rich in excellent materials. The Furong Mountain in the center of the Aquarius continent was famous for its Furong Mountain, which was located at the edge of the Scroll Lake. It was close to one of the 4 major cities by the lake, Verdant City. However, a fire burned overnight and a fierce battle comparable to the battle between 2 nascent soul cultivators broke out. The cultivators of the Furong Mountain and a dozen unknown cultivators who snuck into the island fought fiercely. The light of treasures illuminated half of the Scroll Lake. There was a giant lantern that looked like a palace in heaven hanging above the Scroll Lake at night. It was the most shocking and almost competed with the moon. In the end, a fire dragon a few hundred feet long roared and appeared at the top of the Furong Mountain. The earth shook and the mountains shook. The great cultivators of the Willow Palace Island who wanted to check it out gave up. Everyone looked at perfected cultivator Liu Zhimao with a bit of playfulness and even more fear. The Furong Mountain Island master was devastated. The Heavenly Granny Island Master was furious. He scolded Liu Zhimao for breaking the rules of the Alliance and attacking the Furong Mountain during this period. Liu Zhimao retorted and said that he wasn't a fool. Why would he attack the Furong Mountain that belonged to the enclave of the Verdant Canyon Island? The Heavenly Granny Island Master scolded Liu Zhimao. Liu Zhimao didn't say anything and started a fight with the Heavenly Granny Island Master, who wasn't a nascent soul cultivator but had an extremely rare Dharma treasure. That night, Jiyu Kan and Little Loach stood side by side and looked at the intimidating fire dragon on the Furong Mountain. Jiyu Kan smiled and asked, "Same kind?" Little Loach wiped its mouth and said, "If I eat it, I might be able to reach the upper 5 states and won't have to complain to my master for at least 100 years. Jiyu Kan's eyes were burning. He asked, "What's the chance of winning?" Little Loach stared fixedly at the dazzling flames on Hibiscus Mountain while drooling. It had no choice but to cover its mouth and chuckle. "If it's just a fight without any cultivators interfering, I'll have a slightly higher chance of winning in this calligraphy slip lake with a score of 6-4. Jiyu Kan thought for a moment and said, "It's not that simple. Let's listen to Chen Pingan this time. There's no hurry. If those people dare to attack at this time, they definitely aren't here to die." Little Loach said eagerly, "Then, should I dive to the bottom of the lake just to take a look at the Furong Mountain?" Jiyu Kan shook his head and said, "You'd better not do that. Be careful not to walk into a trap. When the news reaches the Verdant Canyon Island, I'll discuss with Liu Zhimao and come up with a foolproof plan." Little Loach said sadly, "Liu Zhimao, that old fox, may not be willing to see me break through the realm again." Jiyu Kan narrowed his eyes and said softly, "Then, what if Liu Larocheng of the Gong Willow Island shows up? Do you think my master can sit still?" Little Loach tilted his head and said, "Did that pure Jade Realm wild cultivator sneak back?" Jiyu Kan twitched the corner of his mouth. "As long as it's confirmed that there's a chance to let you eat a full meal and that you won't be hungry for 100 years after eating this meal, then even if Liu Larocheng doesn't come to the Gong Willow Island, I'll let Liu Larocheng appear in a city in the Bookslip Lake. Mr. Tianhu, Lu Caisang, Yuan Yuan, Yu Hui, and so on, these guys can all come in handy. If I'm going to do it, I'll do it big time." At the peak of the Furong Mountain. In the night, a woman in green with a ponytail shook her wrist. The fire dragon turned into a bracelet and sat on her wrist. On her wrist. Dong Jiyu and Shu Xiaoqiao looked at each other and smiled bitterly. They had fought so hard from breaking the mountain and river's formation to climbing the mountain. One of the 2 martial arts grandmasters had died in the battle. In the end, it was over as soon as eldest senior sister made a move. The woman in green turned her head and took out a handkerchief. She was eating a piece of cake in small bites. It couldn't be helped. Song Laozi had used that lantern lifebound item, but the old golden core cultivator who was good at soul splitting almost escaped. She was very dissatisfied that she kept chasing after the master and disciple like this. It was just that this journey south had been very tiring. She was too embarrassed to say that she was actually very, very bored. At this moment, there was a tall young man in ragged clothes with a face full of blood standing in front of her. He stared at her with hatred. After eating the cake, she was in a better mood. She looked at him and asked, "Do you want to die?" The tall young man spat out a mouthful of blood. Thinking of the miserable master who was swallowed by the fire dragon, the young man's heart was filled with hatred. The determination in his eyes was moving. He clenched his fists and sneered, "You've chased us for so long. What do you Dali cultivators want? Don't you want me to return to Dali and work hard for you? To increase the martial arts fate of your Song clan?" She looked at the tall young man and said slowly, "You're quite smart. Actually, you don't want to die at all. You just know that Dali clingy people will never kill you. You also want to get that immortal jade archive and a life-bound magic weapon from your master, so you've been following your master. But I can see that you still have some feelings for your master. Now, you want to take revenge for him. You plan to learn the immortal spells on the Jade Archive one day and refine that life-bound magic weapon. Then, you'll return to Dali. Yes, you also want to, not cut me into pieces, but make me into a puppet to preserve my intelligence. Wait a moment." She turned her head and ate another small piece of cake. Looking at the few remaining pieces of peach blossom cake on the handkerchief, her mood became somewhat bad. She looked again at the tall youth who was full of shock. "You think about it again, I'll take a look again. You're going to die anyway." The tall young man finally showed a trace of panic. He turned his head and looked at Teacher Song, who he saw as the highest-ranking person in Dali. He smiled coldly and said, "She said she wants to kill me. Do you think it's possible?" She blinked. "If I want to kill you, all of them together won't be able to stop me." Teacher Song was in a dilemma. Before this trip to the south, the old president knew some of the most secretive things about Dali. For example, why did the Dali imperial court respect Saint Ron Jiao so much? A cultivator of the 11th realm was indeed a rare existence in the Aquarius continent. But Dali was not a secular dynasty in the Aquarius continent. Why was even the imperial tutor willing to accommodate Ron Jiao? The answer lay in this gentle and beautiful girl in front of him. The imperial tutor only said one thing to the teacher of the Ministry of Rites. If Ron Xiu died, all of them would die outside the borders of Dali. No one would help them collect their corpses. If Ron Xiu wanted to kill them, they would only have themselves to blame. Not only would the Dali imperial court not support them, but they would also punish their superiors. Ron Xiu gently shook her wrist. The pocket-sized and cute fire dragon true body dripped onto the ground. Finally, it turned into a god covered in golden armor. It strode towards the tall young man who was begging for mercy. In an instant, the tall young man's entire body was wrapped in golden lava. It was as if he was trapped in a cage. He wailed loudly. The golden god simply twisted off the tall young man's head. It opened its mouth and swallowed the head and body into its stomach. Teacher Song's expression was sad, but he did not dare to stop it. They had chased after him for thousands of miles, but it was all for naught. Ron Xiu turned to look in the direction of Willow Palace Island. She thought for a moment and opened her handkerchief. Seeing the few pieces of pastries, she reluctantly closed the handkerchief. She thought that she should eat them sparingly. There was no pastry shop in Dragon Riding Alley here. The eyes of the green-clothed girl, who had always been as silent as an ancient well, suddenly lit up with a resplendent brilliance. She tilted her head, and her face was filled with an expression of disbelief. Her line of sight shifted, and she looked towards a place some distance away from Willow Palace Island. It was as if she saw a familiar existence that was more delicious than the pastries. She quickly took out her handkerchief again and ate the pastries in one bite. She even shook the handkerchief vigorously before putting it back into her sleeve. Finally, she clapped her hands and nodded in satisfaction. Her cheeks were bulging. Why did it look like she was selling stolen goods? 435. Ron Xiu put away the bracelet again. A seemingly exquisite and cute fire dragon wrapped around her wrist, making a slight snoring sound. In the Battle of Furong Mountain, there were 2 Earth Immortals of the Jindan stage, and it even ate a young man with good martial arts, which made it a little full. Ron Xiu asked a question that caught Old Master Song off guard. "Can I move some Furong stones back to Longquan County? I want to open a shop in the alley of the town. I want to open a shop with feng shui stone." Dr. Song of the Ministry of Rites had always been known for his quick thinking in the Dali imperial court. He once had a conversation with His Majesty about 37 questions and answers between the monarch and his minister within 30 minutes. At this moment, he couldn't keep up with Miss Ron's thoughts. After thinking about it, he smiled and said, "Miss Ron, as long as the things nearby are big enough, it doesn't matter even if you empty Furong Mountain." After Ron Xiu got the answer, she immediately let Dong Jiyu and Xu Xiaoqiao start to dig the mountain. When the 2 junior brothers and sister were digging the old farmer, Ron Xiu said to the old man, "Mr. Song, don't worry, I won't let you come here for nothing. In the Book Slip Lake, the Green Tong city we passed by, and on the way back to Dali, if we still follow the original route, I will help you find 3 suitable candidates for cultivation. Together, they can almost fill one." "Xu Xiaoqiao, what's his name?" In the distance, Xu Xiaoqiao whispered softly, "Han Jin." Ron Xiu nodded and said, "Yes, he is not worse than this Han Jin. One is the grandson of the old man who sells crisps at the Earth Temple in Green Tong City, which is the closest to us. Another is the little girl who I gave a candy to at the Sweet Dew Temple stall in Shahao Country. She is the cute little girl with 2 blushes on her face. The last one is at the immortal ferry called Liuji-do. When I bought a large bag of yellow osmanthus persimmon pancakes, I met a local child. At that time, he was competing with me to see whose appetite was bigger. As a result, he had a toothache and ran home crying to find his parents. The 3 Dali men couldn't believe it. Was it really not a joke? Unexpectedly, Dr. Song nodded and said, when Mr. Dong and Miss Shu have dug enough Furong Mountain, we will return to the Earth Temple in Green Tong City and find the child named Tong Shan. The men immediately knew that since Dr. Song remembered the child's name, it was obvious that he must be a piece of jade with good aptitude. Ruan Xiu raised her head and looked in the direction of Gongliu Island. When she made this movement, the fire dragon on her wrist, which had originally planned to hibernate, opened its eyes and looked in that direction with her. Xu Xiaoqiao suddenly said, "Senior sister, Master has told us that you are not allowed to, except for official business at Calligraphy Lake." Xu Xiaoqiao glanced at the black-robed young man, Dong Jiyu. This time, on the path to Furong Mountain, it was this second senior brother of the same sect who revealed his true form and forcefully broke through the barrier of the formation. He was severely injured. Not only did he lose a fang, he also lost at least 40 to 50 years of cultivation. Dong Gu's face was stiff. He added the last 2 words that Xu Xiaoqiao didn't dare to say, "Nonsense." Ruan Xiu looked around with some regret, "Then let's leave it." Dong Jiyu and Xu Xiaoqiao nodded at the same time. Song Fuzi also nodded. Ruan Xiu looked at their identical actions and found it interesting. She smiled. "What are you doing? Are you chicks pecking rice?" Her smile made the young man who had long been attracted to Ruan Xiu. He was in a trance. In the Crying Ape Street in the Pond Water City that specialized in selling immortal artifacts, an old man in a long green robe was walking on it. His face was ordinary and his aura was ordinary. He was like a rich man in an ordinary house. His 2 fingers repeatedly rubbed a piece of snow as he walked and looked around. He shopped a lot but did not buy anything. Fortunately, there were many strange people and strange things in the Crying Ape Street, so no one cared about this tall and thin old man. The old man walked to a shop. The old shopkeeper, who was proud of his success, was drinking wine. There were 2 dishes, salted peanuts and silver fish fillets, a specialty of Booksword Lake. When he saw the old man in the long robe, the old shopkeeper didn't even bat an eyelid. The old man seemed a little regretful. He asked curiously, "Shopkeeper, did you sell the great imitation Chu Huang sword?" "Oh, you sold the painting of a lady? Did you meet a sucker?" The old shopkeeper who guarded this ancestral shop had a strange temperament. He didn't know how to do business. If an ordinary shopkeeper met a customer who didn't know how to speak, he would have rolled his eyes or directly chased him away. However, the old shopkeeper didn't. Instead, he was interested. He smiled. "Yes, it's the same customer. A foreigner who knows his stuff. You can't be considered a sucker. You can't buy anything." The old man clicked his tongue and said, "Not bad, not bad. You are much worse than your great-grandfather in business. But your luck is much better. You can even sell this. I thought you would eat dust for 100 years. The old shopkeeper glanced at the stranger. "You talk big. Which immortal master of Booksword Lake are you?" "Haha, but if I remember correctly, any slightly capable island master is now on Gongliu Island. Who has the time to come here and pretend to be an old immortal?" The old man said worriedly, "There are hundreds of people eating and drinking on Gongliu Island. It's just a cesspool." The old shopkeeper was a little happy. "Those immortals flying here and there aren't us mortal masters. Gongliu Island can't be turned into a toilet. Besides, Gongliu Island is like a graveyard. Who cares what it will become after the meeting?" The old man sighed. "I care quite a lot." The old shopkeeper found it more and more interesting. He waved his hand. "Brother, want a drink?" The old man shook his head. "It's not much better than swill." "I don't drink." The old shopkeeper laughed and scolded. "Good intentions are treated as ill intent. Forget it if you don't want to drink. But your bad temper is to my liking. Take a look at the items in the shop. If you see something you like, I will give you a 10% discount. The old man waved his hand and walked out of the shop. He had walked through the entire Crying Ape Street. It had been too long since he returned to Book Lake. Things were still the same, but the people had changed. He did not see any familiar faces. The old man walked out of Crying Ape Street and came to a quiet alley in Pondwater City. At the end, he took out a key and opened the door. There was another world inside. No one lived here, but there were people in charge of taking care of it every once in a while. They were very hardworking and attentive. Therefore, the secluded mansion with winding corridors and deep courtyards was still spotless. The old man came to a waterside pavilion. He opened the window and listened carefully. There was the sound of spring water hitting rocks. About an hour later, a rich old man who was unknown in Pondwater City came to the waterside pavilion. He bowed and said respectfully, "Junior Wang Guanfeng of Budi Ali greets old ancestor Liu." The old man turned around and smiled. "You must be the great-great-grandson of Stone Hair Country's Wang Water tribe, right? Come in and have a seat. I am indebted to your Wang clan. Your Pondwater City's Wang clan, which moved out of the Stone Hair Country, and the successive heads of the Wang clan, know my character better than many of the young people in Book Lake. Therefore, there is no need to be so reserved." There were no extra decorations in the waterside pavilion. There were only a few white chairs on the ground. Wang Guanfeng, who was actually richer than the Pondwater City's Lord Fan clan, sat on one of the chairs with trepidation. He did not think too highly of himself just because of the old man's amiable appearance. The old man with the surname Liu asked about Book Lake's situation in the past 100 years. Wang Guanfeng answered them one by one. After the old man with the surname Liu listened to the recent situation of Gong Willow Island, he smiled and said, "I have heard about Liu Jimao and Jiyu Kan from Qingxia Island even when I was so far away from Tail Ferry." Wang Guanfeng carefully considered and answered, "Now the Song clan and Zhuing dynasty are competing with each other over Book Lake. We have bet on Qingxia Island. Zhuing dynasty should have chosen Qingzhong, Tianlao, and Lisu Islands as an alliance. The person in charge is a 9th realm sword cultivator from the royal family of Zhuing dynasty. He has some connections with Huangyang Island. However, we can't find out where this person is hiding. However, there should be disagreements within Zhuing dynasty as to whether to draw Jiyu Kan to their side or to kill him. There is no consensus. Therefore, the assassination in Pondwater City has caused some forces in Zhuing dynasty to suffer a great loss. Liu Jimao himself is still in the nascent soul realm and there is no sign of a breakthrough. However, the flood dragon beside Jiyu Kan has already reached the nascent soul realm. Its combat power is so amazing that even Liu Jimao has to be wary of it. Perhaps in the future, Liu Jimao and Jiyu Kan will share Book Lake. However, this is the result of our ancestor standing by and doing nothing. The old man smiled and asked, "That little devil named Jiyu Kan, who is said to be invincible in Book Lake?" Wang Guanfeng finally understood some of the hidden meaning. He asked cautiously, "Ancestor, do you want us to bet on Zhuing dynasty?" The old man shook his head and said, "It's two different things. The reason why Liu Jimao is able to achieve what he has today is partly because of Jiyu Kan and that nascent soul flood dragon. Let him sit on the throne of Book Lake for a few days. When Jiyu Kan dies, Liu Jimao will be half crippled. Everybody kicks a man who is down. Book Lake will still have the same surname 200 years ago." The old man smiled and said, "When did the wild cultivators of Book Lake become so fearless of death? A little kid dares to be so arrogant." Wang Guanfeng explained, "It's not that Zhuing dynasty didn't have the idea of drawing Jiyu Kan to their side and restricting Liu Jimao. Otherwise, they wouldn't have allowed Jiyu Kan to run amok. However, the flood dragon's growth speed is so fast that it rose from the Earth Immortal realm to the nascent soul realm in less than 3 years. It's really incredible. It's really shocking." Obviously, the old man was not the kind of cultivator who liked to criticize his subordinates. He nodded and said, "It's not your fault. I was traveling with 2 friends when we talked about this. Even though they are in a high realm and have high vision, they also had the same thought as you, Wang Guanfeng. It's almost unbelievable. It's not a problem to bet on Liu Jimao. If you're not afraid that I'll cheat the Wang family of your money, Just put all your money on him. The old man smiled and said, as for that you can, I'll kill him myself. You just have to pretend to be deaf and dumb and wait for the changes. You don't have to do anything. Just wait for the money. Wang Guanfeng swallowed. The old man looked indifferent. Since we're all wild cultivators, no one's life is more valuable. No one can kill from the beginning to the end. At least in the Bookslip Lake, there's no such logic in my place. Wang Guanfeng prostrated himself on the ground. In fact, there were rules in the Bookslip Lake. If the old man of the Bookslip Lake didn't mention it, the young people didn't know about it. The old woman at the gate of the ghost cultivator's mansion was a little livelier recently. Every day, she hoped that the young accountant would come to visit her. Even though Mr. Chen came and went in a hurry every time, he didn't stop at the gate. He just greeted her and left. He didn't even chat with her. However, the old woman named Hong Su, who was neither human nor ghost, was still a little happy. After the accountant left this day, she stood at the gate of the mansion and looked at the back of the figure in the distance. She didn't even notice that her master appeared beside her. When she suddenly realized it, the ghost cultivator surnamed Ma snorted. What? You still want a sparrow to fly to the branch? You want a master like Chen Pinggan to favor you and take you in as a servant girl? She hurriedly curtsied to the ghost cultivator and said miserably, Master, you must be joking. How would this servant dare to have such improper thoughts? I deserve to be struck by lightning. The ghost cultivator threw a small bag of immortal money to her. Chen Pinggan will often come to the mansion as a guest. 1 piece of snow every day is enough to restore you to your previous appearance. Then, you'll be able to maintain your appearance for about 10 years. This will prevent Chen Pinggan from thinking that our Zhuxian mansion is a Yama's palace that can't even afford to hire a living person as a concierge. She held the bag of immortal money with both hands and bowed to express her gratitude. Of course, she wouldn't really have any thoughts about the young and gentle accountant. No matter how beautiful or ugly a woman was, it didn't mean that she would like a man no matter how good he was. It also didn't mean that she wouldn't like him no matter how bad he was. Yu Laro, who was the matchmaker for men and women in the world, must be an old urchin. She had a head full of black hair but an aged face. She had only stayed in this lifeless mansion, guarding this door day after day, year after year. It was simply too boring. Now that she had finally seen a young man, she naturally had to cherish him a little. The ghost cultivator, who didn't like to talk to people, stayed at the gate for the first time today. She looked at the vast lake outside the verdant canyon island with a worried face. Previously, Liu Zhimao had a big fight with the old island owner of the Tianlao Island, and the latter's brain almost became the white rice porridge in the Gongliu Island that night. Although the allies of the verdant canyon island seemed to have a lot of morale, people with discerning eyes knew that whether Liu Zhimao was the mastermind behind the tragedy in Furong Mountain or not, Liu Zhimao's road to the throne of the Jianghu monarch had encountered a lot of obstacles. Unknowingly, he had lost the support of many small island owners. Because there were 2 long-lasting golden rules and jade rules in the Bookslip Lake. One was to help those close to you, but not those who were right. The other was to help the weak, but not the strong. Therefore, the atmosphere in the verdant canyon island was a bit solemn in the past few days. The number of banquets on the 12 islands had decreased a lot. Chen Pinggan still frequently visited the Zhuxian mansion, the Moonhook Island, and the Jade Pot Island. The Moonhook Island's Yu Hui was the easiest to talk to, and the business was the smoothest. The grand cultivator of the school of yin and yang in the Jade Pot Island was also okay. Although he wasn't very friendly, he had the demeanor of a businessman, which was more acceptable to Chen Pinggan. On the other hand, the ghost cultivator with the surname Ma, who had the lowest cultivation base, was a bit stubborn. Unless Chen Pinggan could persuade Liu Zhongruan of the Pearl Island, there would be no negotiation. Therefore, Chen Pinggan ran to the Pearl Island from time to time like a matchmaker. Liu Zhongruan was more stubborn than the ghost cultivator. Even if Chen Pinggan didn't mention that he was the Pac-Man, he was the distinguished guest of the Pearl Island. The Pearl Pavilion had good wine, good tea, and beautiful ladies, and there was no place for him. However, if he was the one who persuaded the lowly handyman of the Liu royal family, he wouldn't even enter the mountain gate of the Pearl Island. The stubborn Chen Pinggan did not cross the mountain gate. Every time, he would exchange a few words with Liu Zhongruan at the ferry, and then return home. In fact, the two of them could have a chat. Back then, they had wandered around the lotus blossom-blessed land for nearly 300 years and had seen a lot of official affairs and royal affairs. However, Chen Pinggan did not want to be distracted, and he could not afford to be distracted. In the future, when he was about to leave the Bookslip Lake, Chen Pinggan would definitely pay a visit to the Pearl Hairpin Island and ask Liu Zhongruan, the female cultivator who almost became the first female emperor of the Aquarius continent. Although he did not successfully ask for the yin souls from the ghost cultivator surnamed Ma, it was more meaningful to exchange some ghost Dao spells than to chat with Yu Hui, who could talk nonsense for 4 hours. As for the yin-yang cultivators of the Jade Pot Island, Chen Pinggan could not pry open their mouths even if he wanted to. Therefore, Chen Pinggan went to the Verdant Canyon Island more often, and when he took a stroll after meals, he would often arrive at the Verdant Canyon Island before he could figure out something. On this day, Chen Pinggan went to the sword room to receive a secret letter from the Flying Sword at dusk, and then came to the Verdant Canyon Island to relax. Fan Junmaro of the Old Dragon City had replied, but it was only 4 words, no comment. Chen Pinggan was at his wits' end. The future Nanyu god of Dali was a first-class god on the same level as Wei Pai. Moreover, Fan Junmaro was much more narrow-minded than Wei Pai, so he could not afford to offend him. However, Chen Pinggan had clearly written in the letter that he had sent. Since Chen Pinggan was the one asking for help, and both sides were doing business, Fan Junmao shouldn't have done this. Today, Chen Pinggan greeted the old woman at the gate, and then went to find the ghost cultivator surnamed Ma. Without stopping or chatting, Hong Su, who had recovered her appearance to that of a 40-year-old woman, did not feel disappointed. Instead, she felt that it was quite good. Inexplicably, she felt more comfortable. After leaving the Verdant Canyon Island, Chen Pinggan found Jiyu Kan and Little Loach standing at the end of the path. Jiyu Kan asked Chen Pinggan if he was free tonight, and Jiyu Kan said that his mother cooked a home-cooked meal again. Chen Pinggan said that he could not tonight, and that he had to go to 2 islands far away from the Verdant Canyon Island. When he came back, it would be very late, and he could not even have supper. Jiyu Kan was a little disappointed. Chen Pinggan did not say anything. Jiyu Kan walked Chen Pinggan to the outside of the house at the mountain gate, and suddenly asked, "Chen Pinggan, in fact, you have some opinions about my mother, right?" Chen Pinggan rubbed his head. "Don't think too much about these things. If there are any problems, I will find time and opportunity to talk to your aunt. But on your side, I will never say anything bad about your mother." Jiyu Kan seemed to understand, and left with Little Loach. Chen Pinggan went back to the house and buried his head in the desk. In the tall building of the Pond City, Kui Dong put down a secret letter. Kui Dong rubbed his eyebrows and thought carefully. Kui Dongshan still stayed in the Golden Thunder Pool, and did not leave, but now he was imitating Chen Pinggan's heaven and earth pillar. The direction of the world and the ups and downs of people's hearts were traceable, and this had always been Kui Dong's profound knowledge. Kui Dong said to himself, on the one hand, Chen Pinggan came earlier than expected, because Jiyu Dao's brain, and of course, Chen Pinggan's, were better than the embroidery river god, so the possibility of Wan Xiu and Jiyu Kan hurting each other in the Book Lake was strangled in the cradle. But this was part of Chen Pinggan's plan. Even if you were not here, I would not stop him. On the other hand, I slightly underestimated Jiyu Kan's composure. I did not act rashly and directly drove the Loach to provoke Wan Xiu that night. As for Wan Xiu's affection for Chen Pinggan, her attention was diverted from the Loach, and the ambition of Liu Laocheng, the owner of Gongliu Island, both of them were bigger than I thought. These were not small variables. According to the deduction result of the Riding Dragon Alley incident, I could roughly conclude that Wan Xiu was a very important existence to the old Divine Lord. She was even more important than Li Liu and Fan Junmao. She was very likely to be one of the great spirits of the divine path, so she could see the karma of a person. With her, Chen Pinggan knew the imperial examination questions in advance. The 4th difficulty was countless difficulties, and almost half of the difficulty could be reduced. But I still let Wan Xiu, who found many excuses and refused to move in Greentong City, stay in the Book Lake justifiably, and let you accept your defeat wholeheartedly. Speaking of this, Kui Dong looked at Kui Dongshan with a smile. Since Liu Larocheng secretly entered the boundary of the Book Lake, he still did not communicate with Dallas Spy through any channels. This showed that Liu Larocheng, a wild cultivator of the upper 5 realms, had planned to cut off all means of retreat after climbing up the relationship with Zun Yuan, the lord of Jade Gui sect. He chose to bet all of his belongings in the Book Lake as a sign of allegiance for the Jade Gui sect to establish their sect in the Book Lake. Generally speaking, Liu Larocheng, as the owner of Gongliu Island, had many old connections hidden under the surface. As long as the Jade Gui sect was located in the Book Lake, Liu Larocheng would not lose and would even make a small profit. It was just that Liu Zhimao and the behind-the-scenes Song clan would get the majority of the profits. However, as a wild cultivator, who would not bet on such a good bet? Not to mention Liu Larocheng, the #1 wild cultivator of the Treasure Bottle continent. Even if Liu Zhimao's wings were strong, facing Liu Larocheng, who was deeply rooted in the Book Lake, once the latter disturbed the situation, the former might not be willing to die together. This was the general trend. Liu Larocheng had it. A single person could monopolize the power of the wind and clouds. How difficult it was. Liu Zhimao was still far from it. Half of his credit was due to his disciple, Jiyu Kan, and an animal. He was like a woman who had saved up bit by bit. How could he compare with an old bastard like Liu Larocheng, who had single-handedly slaughtered his way out? Cultivation, temperament, and skills were not on the same level. Liu Zhimao was given another 100 or 200 years to manage the territory and accumulate connections, then he would have to ascend to the upper 5 realms. On the other hand, Liu Larocheng was a hero that Kui Dong himself admired. Kui Dongshan walked upside down and said casually, "Wan Xiu stays in the Book Lake, you can also take advantage of the situation. The changes caused by 1 or 2 key chess pieces will not affect the overall situation at all. You can also reverse the general trend that you want." Kui Dongshan turned around and stood still again. He said indifferently, "Find an excuse for the Song clan and let them leave Green Tong City quickly." Kui Dong smiled and asked, "Why is that? It's obviously a small profit for you, and you don't want it." Kui Dongshan rubbed his cheeks with all his might. "Of course I want to gamble. If I lose, at most I will go bankrupt. If I win, I will leave Cliff Academy and help you plan the general trend south of the Aquarius continent." Kui Dong truly did not understand, and could not help but ask, "Why is that?" Kui Dongshan acted shamelessly. "I like it. I like to see the look on your face when you calculate and calculate, only to realize that you have calculated nothing." Kui Dong laughed out loud. "Then you will be disappointed." After Kui Dongshan punched him, it was his turn to ask, "Why?" Kui Shi smiled and said, "You can take a guess." Kui Dongshan suddenly asked, "If Liu Larocheng kills Jiyu Kan, then wouldn't this situation end anticlimactically?" Kui Dong asked back, "Am I the one who needs to be anxious? It's not you, right?" Kui Dongshan laughed mischievously. Kui Dong smiled faintly. "Then I have to say something that will spoil the mood. If Chen Pinggan starts to calmly face those ghosts who have died unjustly, there will definitely be many interesting things. Among them, even if there is only one otherworldly item or one of the otherworldly item's relatives, they will question Chen Pinggan. Apologize. No need. Compensate. Also no need. Even if you want to exchange a life for a life, can you do it? At that time, what would Chen Pinggan do? How would he get over this hurdle? This is only one of the countless difficulties." Kui Dongshan jumped up and down, covering his ears with both hands. "I don't want to listen, the old bastard's chanting is so unpleasant." At the Zhuxian Mansion's gatehouse. On this day, Chen Pinggan was sitting on the doorstep. The woman named Hong Su, for some reason, no longer needed to absorb spiritual energy from a snowflake every day to maintain her appearance. Therefore, she quickly regained her appearance as an old woman when they first met. Then, on this day, Chen Pinggan suddenly took out a pen and paper. He smiled and said that he wanted to ask her about the past. He didn't know if it was appropriate or not, but he didn't want her to misunderstand. Before answering the question, she stood at the door of the dark room and asked with a smile, "Mr. Chen, Are you really a scholar from the 100 schools of thought? Chen Pinggan shook his head and said, I'm not, but I have a friend who likes to write about mountains and rivers, and he writes very well. I hope that when I meet this friend again in the future, I can tell him about it or write down some of it and show it to him directly. She twirled her skirt and walked quickly to Chen Pinggan, asking, Can I sit? Chen Pinggan said helplessly, This is your home. She smiled and sat down, but there was still some distance between her and Chen Pinggan. She said a little embarrassedly, Mr. Chen, I have to say in advance that I don't have many stories to tell. Mr. Chen will probably be disappointed after hearing them. Also, can my name really appear in a book? Chen Pinggan smiled and said, Of course, as long as you don't mind. Also, after we're done talking, you must remember to remind me which stories can be written, which can't be written, which people and events, and whether to write more or less. When the time comes, I'll tell my friend one by one. She clenched her fists on her knees and was in high spirits. Chen Pinggan looked at her with a face full of smiles. His eyes were gentle and clear, as if he had seen a good girl. She quickly stood up and cheekily curtsied before sitting down, smiling like a flower. As she narrated her story, she actually recalled many people and things that she had mistakenly thought she had long forgotten. Chen Pinggan wrote them down one by one. Occasionally, when she was tired, she would not feel anything wrong. She would look straight at the pale-faced accountant and write seriously with her head down. In the end, Chen Pinggan put away the pen and paper and cupped his fists to thank her. She covered her mouth and laughed, then reminded in a small voice, Mr. Chen, remember to tell your friend that he must write a book. If he really can't, I can take out a few snowflakes to spend money. Chen Pinggan frowned and said, How can I take out money that goes against my conscience? Don't worry, my friend still has this much money. Also, you have to believe in his writing ability. There will definitely be bookstores willing to buy it. After Chen Pinggan left, the gatekeeper's old woman was still full of smiles. She could not help but jump on the spot. She found that the old master of Zhuxian Mansion was standing beside her. She quickly stopped smiling. She did not expect that old-fashioned and strict old master to ask a question. Later, tell Chen Pinggan that the story between me and the eldest princess, Liu Zhongruan, can also be written. As long as he is willing to write, I will give you a small sum of money as compensation. She timidly said, What if this servant can't convince Mr. Chen? Will the old master punish this servant? The ghost cultivator surnamed Ma cursed and strode over the threshold. Then he is blind and deaf. It has nothing to do with an ugly person like you. Mother *K, how can your trivial family affairs compare to the soul-stirring love and hatred between me and Liu Zhongruan? That Chen Pinggan is not a fool. At this point, the ghost cultivator coughed and turned his head, saying, When you mention this to Chen Pinggan, remember to talk properly and torture him. She felt relieved and nodded vigorously. Then she was a little puzzled. When did the old master become so reasonable? 10. 436. In the house at the entrance of the Qingxia Island, there were maps of the Book Lake Island and the nearby cities, prefectures, and counties, household registration files of the incense house, pedigrees of the ancestral halls of each island, and manuscripts of nearly 200,000 words. Most of them had been put into the drawers of the cabinet, just like the medicine drawers of the Yang family's shop and the dusty drugstore. But the desk was still piled up like a mountain. In the house, there was a desk, a row of cabinets against the wall, a dining table, a chair, 2 benches, and a small stool. That was all. Later on, because Ji can often visited the house, she liked to sit at the entrance of the house for a long time from the end of autumn to the beginning of winter. If she was not basking in the sun, taking a nap, she would be chatting with little Loach. When Chen Pinggan visited a purple bamboo island, he asked the extremely scholarly island master for 3 purple bamboos, 2 big and 1 small. The former was chopped into 2 small bamboo chairs, while the latter was roasted and polished into a fishing rod. But after making the fishing rod, he had no chance to fish in the Book Lake. Tonight, Chen Pinggan opened the food box and ate supper silently at the dining table. Chen Pinggan was still waiting for the reply from Mount Taiping of the Tongye Island. Even though Wei Pai had given all the answers, it was not that Chen Pinggan did not believe in the old deity of the Shishui country, but what Chen Pinggan needed to do next, no matter how hard he tried, was not excessive. It was just a cross-continent flying sword message, and it was possible that it would disappear like a clay ox in the sea. Besides, the Book Lake was a place of trouble, and the flying sword message came from the Qingxia Island, which was the target of public criticism. Therefore, Chen Pinggan had prepared for the worst. If it did not work, he would ask Wei Pai to help him write a letter to Zhong Kuei from Mount Taiping from Mount Taiyun. If it was the Chen Pinggan who was traveling the Jianghu for the first time, perhaps even if he had these connections, he would only go around on his own and not bother others. He would feel uncomfortable in his heart, but it was different now. Chen Pinggan did not want to be a loner like what the old Taoist from the East Sea Monastery said. It was not scary to owe someone a favor. He would return what he borrowed. When his friend met with difficulties in the future, he would be able to ask for it more easily. As long as it was not difficult to return what he borrowed. After Chen Pinggan finished his supper, he packed up the food box and opened the court bulletin beside him. He began to read it. Written on it were some interesting news and anecdotes from Bookslip Lake. It was similar in nature to the official bulletins sent to the government offices by the feudal officials of the secular dynasties. Actually, during his travels, Chen Pinggan had once seen the wonders of this kind of immortal bulletins when he was at the Hundred Flowers Garden Inn in Azure Phoenix Country. After staying at Bookslip Lake for a long time, Chen Pinggan also did as the Romans did. He asked Ji Yu Kan to help him ask for a copy of the immortal bulletins. As long as there was a fresh one, he would ask someone to send it to the house. There were interesting things happening almost every day on Willow Palace Island. If it happened on the day, it would spread throughout Bookslip Lake the next day. This was all thanks to a place called Catkin Island. The cultivators on the island, from the island owner to the outer sect disciples, and even the handamen, did not cultivate on the island. They wandered outside all day long. All they did to earn money and make a living depended on what they saw and heard on various occasions and a little bit of groundless speculation. They would also send out immortal bulletins from time to half of Bookslip Lake Island, as well as the rich and powerful clans in the 4 lakeside cities. If there were few matters, the court bulletin might be as small as a piece of tofu. The price was also low. It was guaranteed that 1 piece of snow would cost money. If there were many matters, the court bulletin would be as big as a map and would cost money for a dozen pieces of snow. Recently, the Palace Bestowment Bulletin mainly wrote about the recent situation of Gong Willow Island. It also introduced some of the outstanding aspects of the newly rising islands, as well as some of the old and experienced big islands. For example, the old ancestor of Jade Bridge Island had brought back an outstanding young cultivation genius who was born with a Daoist resonance with talismans. Another example was that among the female cultivators in the Waterfall Nunnery on Lame Island, a girl who was originally unknown suddenly grew up in the past 2 years. Lame Island specially opened up a road of fortune for her. Unexpectedly, in the first month, there were a lot of rich people on the mountain who came to watch the girl. They threw a lot of immortal money, which made the Riki of Lame Island soar by more than 10%. There was also Yunxiu Island, which had been silent for 100 years and had declined. A cultivator who used to be a handaman and was always looked down upon became the new Earth Immortal of Bookslip Lake after Lord Tianhu of Qingxia Island. Therefore, Yunxiu Island, which was not even qualified to go to Willow Palace Island to participate in the League meeting, had been clamoring to arrange a seat for them these days. Otherwise, no matter who became the ruler of Jianghu, as long as Yunxiu Island was absent, it would not be legitimate. Chen Pinggan looked at these wonderful and colorful other people's affairs and thought it was quite interesting. After reading it once, he could not help but read it again. In this announcement, the female cultivator on Lame Island was mentioned. The chief cultivator of Catkin Island specially left a palm-sized space for her. It was similar to the steely rubbing technique used on the ferry on Dianshan Mountain. Together with the painting technique that Chen Pinggan used on the ferry on Osmanthus Island, the girl's appearance in the announcement was vivid and lifelike. It was a profile of her standing under the plum blossom tree in the Waterfall Nunnery. Chen Pinggan took a few glances at it and found that it was indeed a girl with a charming temperament. He wondered if she had changed her face with the secret art of skin changing and bone scraping. If Zhu Lian and the senior surnamed Zun were here, they would probably see through it at a glance. Chen Pinggan bought the announcement late. When he was reading about the strange people and customs of the various islands, he did not know that before the massacre of Furong Mountain, all the news about him, the accountant of Qingxia Island, was the biggest source of income for Catkin Island. Of course, Catkin Island did not dare to write too much about it. It was more full of praise. Otherwise, they would have to worry that Ji Kan would destroy Catkin Island with her big loach. Throughout history, the cultivators of Catkin Island had suffered great losses. Since the founding of the ancestral hall, they had moved 3 times in the past 500 years. The worst time was when their vitality was greatly damaged and their financial resources were insufficient. They had no choice but to rent a small piece of land on an island. The first time was in the early days of Catkin Island. The cultivator did not know the severity of his words. He wrote an announcement and offended the illegitimate son of the ruler of Jianghu at that time. The second time was 300 years ago. He offended the island master of Gongliu Island. He added oil and vinegar to the old immortal and his disciple female cultivator. Even though it was all good words and the words he wrote were full of envy for the master and disciple becoming a celestial couple, it was still a big deal. It attracted Liu Larocheng to visit the island. He did not kill anyone. However, he was so scared that Catkin Island moved to another island the next day as an apology. The third time was Liu Zhimao. In the announcement, Liu Zhimao's Daoist name was accidentally changed from True Lord Zhejiang to Heavenly Lord Zhejiang. Liu Zhimao became the laughingstock of the entire Bookslip Lake overnight. Liu Zhimao killed his way to Catkin Island and directly tore down their ancestral hall. This was the first time Catkin Island had suffered such a heavy blow. When the cultivators of Catkin Island finally settled the score, they discovered that the person who wrote the Imperial Palace Bulletin had actually run away. As it turned out, that fellow was one of the many unjust ghosts that had died under the hands of a great cultivator on Catkin Island. He had been in seclusion on Catkin Island for as long as 20 years. Because of a single word, he had ruined the entire Catkin Island. As for a sea-viewing cultivator who was in charge of inspecting the announcement, although he did fail in his duty, he could not be considered the main culprit. He was still used as a scapegoat. Chen Pinggan heard a rare knock on the door. Listening to the fragmented but familiar footsteps, it should be the gatekeeper of Zhuxian Mansion, Hong Su. He quickly got up to open the door. The old woman Hong Su, who had a head of black hair, declined Chen Pinggan's invitation to enter the house. She hesitated for a moment and asked softly, "Mr. Chen, can you really not write the story of my master and Pearl Hairpin Island's Master Liu?" Chen Pinggan smiled and said, "Well, the next time I go to your mansion, I'll listen to Ma Yuanji's old story." Although Hong Su's face was old and wrinkled, and for some reason, there was a strong yin evil spirit on her face, which made her look so ugly. However, if she absorbed the spiritual qi of the immortal coin, her appearance was not bad. Moreover, she had a pair of pretty eyes. At this moment, she blinked her eyes, gathered her courage and asked softly, "Mr. Chen, you deliberately refused my master, right? You guessed that my master would ask me to find you again so that you could give me such a big credit, right?" Chen Pinggan put a finger to his mouth, indicating that it was enough for her to keep it between herself and the heavens. Under the moonlight, the woman smiled sweetly. Hong Su looked at the somewhat thin young man in front of her and picked up a pot of wine sealed with yellow paper and wrapped with a red string. She smiled softly and said, "It's not something valuable." As long as he stayed in Bookslip Lake and lived at the mountain gate of Verdant Canyon Island as an accountant, at least he could strive to prevent Ji Kan from continuing to make big mistakes. Since Ji Kan did not admit her mistakes and firmly believed that she was the most right, she naturally would not change her mistakes. Chen Pinggan responded to both the kindness of a meal and the boxing manual. Once, because of the past, he had to break his golden courage to stay in Bookslip Lake with the lowest peace of mind. What he did next was to make up for Ji Kan's mistakes. This was a very simple order. But it was not easy to do, especially in the first step. How could Chen Pinggan convince himself that breaking his golden courage and bidding farewell to the little man in the golden Confucian robe that night was the price he had to pay? In life, it might seem easy to reason things out, but in reality, it was the hardest. The hardest part was whether one would still want to talk about the reasons that required a price. After interrogating and answering one's own conscience, if one still decided to talk about it, the price one would have to pay would often be unknown to others. One would have to bear the hardships, and would not be able to tell others. In addition to these two things, Chen Pinggan needed to mend his state of mind. If he could not mend it halfway, he would collapse first. Chen Pinggan walked out of the house. This time, he did not forget to blow out the 2 lights on the desk and the dining table. After passing through the mountain gate of Verdant Canyon Island, he came to the ferry where Chen Pinggan's ferry was. Standing by the lake, Chen Pinggan did not carry the sword immortal on his back. He also only wore a long green robe. Heaven and earth were quiet and there was no one around. The lake seemed to be covered with broken silver. The night wind after winter was slightly cold. This allowed Chen Pinggan, who had reached the 5th level in his boxing practice, to finally feel the warmth and coldness of the human world that he had not felt for a long time, especially after wearing the golden wine robe. As he went further and further in Jianghu, especially after seeing more and more of the official atmosphere and the scenes on the mountain, Chen Pinggan increasingly admired Master Wan's view on the relationship between master and disciple. He also admired Kui Dongshan's teaching of chess outside the game. Ruan Ting did not take in disciples so that one day when his master argued with others, the disciples would kick up a fuss and attack the opponent wantonly. Or they would resolutely throw themselves into the battlefield without asking for right or wrong. Ruan Ting once said that he only took in disciples who were on the same path as him, not some disciples who only knew how to sell their lives for him. The difficulties in life were difficult to care about and difficult to settle. The more difficult was that the most important person would also make you feel difficult to settle. But this was only the difficulties of good people. After all, there were more people who never thought about these things. If the world punches me, why can't I return a kick? Since the people of this world dared to punch me until my face was covered in blood and dirt and made me unhappy, I will definitely smash them into pieces. As for whether or not they will harm the innocent, whether or not they deserve to die, I will not even think about it. This was not right. Cultivating strength was the foundation of standing. Cultivating the heart was the path to the top. On the great path, whether it was walking straight with a sword or traveling with books to study, occasionally one would have to make way for others. Chen Pinggan's expression was bitter. He only felt that the world was big, and these words could only be suppressed in his stomach. No one would listen. Chen Pinggan's thoughts moved slightly. He thought for a while. He took out a piece of black charcoal from the object in front of him. He drew a large circle on the ferry. Then he bent down and slowly drew a straight line in the circle. It was equivalent to dividing the circle into 2. Chen Pinggan squatted beside the line and did not move for a long time. His brows were tightly furrowed. The dispirited accountant had to take off the sword-cultivating gourd from his waist and drink a mouthful of wooty wine to refresh himself. Then he wrote good and evil on the top and bottom of the straight line. Chen Pinggan wanted to take a step forward on the word one that he had stopped on the road in his heart, unwilling to think deeply, and powerless to explore deeply tonight. Just like the young man wearing straw shoes in the clay bottle alley, who walked on the covered bridge. Chen Pinggan squatted on the ground and gently wrote the words human based on the straight line between good and evil. He murmured, "I can only think so much for the time being." Chen Pinggan closed his eyes and drank another mouthful of wine. After opening his eyes, he stood up and strode to the edge of the good semicircle. In one breath, he drew a diagonal line to the other part of the evil semicircle. He moved and drew another diagonal line from the bottom to the top. In the end, the circle had been divided into 6 pieces by Chen Pinggan. The intersection was only at the center of the circle. After that, Chen Pinggan seemed to be suddenly enlightened. He quickly walked to the good semicircle on the straight line. In the middle of the 3 areas, the charcoal pencil in his hand moved quickly. He said to himself, if this is a sincere heart that is the most firm and the mind is not easy to change, then the people in this place, the 3 schools of learning, the 100 schools of thought, And even if they have never read or learned words, the best knowledge is that there is a house of gold in the books, 1,000 millets in the books, and cultivating oneself to govern the country and the world are the best knowledge. Because they can understand it, they don't even need any sages to persuade them. Because this kind of people are willing to listen, and they are willing to sit and listen to the truth. No matter how hard the world is, they will stick to their original heart. Chen Pinggan quickly got up and retreated to the middle of the semicircle of evil that was tit for tat with the semicircle full of charcoal words. He squatted down and continued to write with his charcoal pencil. He murmured, "Human nature is evil. This evil is not a pejorative, but it describes another nature in human heart. That is, they are born to perceive the one in the world. They fight and snatch to maximize their own interests. Unlike the former, they can entrust their life and death to the three immortals of Confucianism and the inheritance of their descendants. Here, I is the whole world. If I die, the world dies. If I live, the world lives. The individual me, this small one, is no less important than the big one of the whole world. This is the reason why Zhu Lian explained why he didn't want to kill one person instead of saving the world. It's also not a pejorative, it's just pure human nature. Although I haven't seen it with my own eyes, I believe that it has also pushed the world forward. Only people whose minds are completely focused on blossoming and bearing fruit can say things like, "I don't care about the flood after I die, I'd rather betray the world, and I'll go against the tide at certain critical moments." However, this kind of nature that almost all living things in the world have is very likely to be the foundation of us humans, or at least one of them. This explains why I couldn't understand why so many unkind people can cultivate and become immortals without hindrance. They can even live better than the so-called good people. This is because the world gives birth to all living things and is not biased. It doesn't necessarily determine life and death based on the good and evil of humans. He took a big gulp of wine. Chen Pinggan stood up and walked to the rightmost side of the upper semicircle. The people here are not as tenacious as the people on the right. They are more unstable, but they are still biased towards good. However, they will change because of people, places, and times. There will be all kinds of changes. That requires the saints of the 3 sects and the 100 schools of thought to teach that a jade that is not carved will not become a treasure. If one does not learn, one will not know. They warn that the heavens are watching what people do. They encourage them to say that the merits in this life will be rewarded in the next life. When Chen Pinggan wrote this, he thought of something. He came to the 2 words good and evil near the center of the semicircle and slowly added 2 sentences with a charcoal pencil. He wrote on the top, "I'm willing to believe that people in this world are not all barter." Below, he wrote, "If there is no substantial return for any contribution, it will be a loss of my interest." Chen Pinggan put away the charcoal pencil and murmured, "Once a person perceives that something is damaged, he will have great doubts and anxiety in the depths of his heart. He will begin to look around, thinking that he must get it back from somewhere else and ask for more. This explains why the book slip lake is so chaotic and everyone is struggling so hard. Also, as I thought before, why so many people must be punched and kicked in more places in the world without caring about the lives of others after being punched somewhere in the world. It is not just for the sake of survival. Take Ji Kan for example. Although he has been living a good life, he will still follow this vein and become a person who can say I like to kill. It is not only because of the environment of the book slip lake, but also because of the division of the ridges in Ji Kan's heart. When he has a chance to come into contact with a bigger world, for example, when I gave him the little loach and came to the book slip lake, Ji Kan will naturally seize more of what belongs to others, regardless of whether it is money or life. Chen Pinggan came to the leftmost side of the upper semicircle. The people here are the most disorderly. They want to do good, but they don't know how to do it. They want to do evil, but they don't have the courage to do so. Therefore, it is easy for them to feel that studying is useless and that the truth misleads me. Although they are in this semicircle, it is also easy for them to fall into evil. Therefore, there are so many sanctimonious hypocrites in the world. Even the Buddha in the Buddhist scriptures is worried about the arrival of the age of Dharma. The people here go with the flow and live a very hard life. In fact, they live the hardest life. As I said to Ji Kan earlier, The truth in the world is good. The true freedom of the strong lies in being able to protect this group of people so that they don't have to worry about the people in the middle of the lower semicircle. The people in the middle don't have to worry about the wealth that they have accumulated through hard work being destroyed in a day and night. So, even if these people don't have to be reasonable, or even if they don't know too much about reason, or even if their occasional unreasonable behavior slightly shakes the well-behaved and stable wooden chair that the Confucian school has built, they can still live well. Chen Pinggan stood up and moved to the rightmost side of the corresponding lower semicircle. He slowly wrote, "The people here are people. You told them to put down their butcher's knife and become a Buddha on the spot. It's the greatest thing to know that you can correct your mistakes. Compared to the people in the middle, it's destined to be empty talk." Although there was still a large blank space on the leftmost side of the lower semicircle, Chen Pinggan's face was already pale. He actually showed signs of exhaustion. After taking a big gulp of wine, he stood up shakily. The charcoal in his hand had been ground to the size of a fingernail. Chen Pinggan calmed his mind. His fingers trembled, and he couldn't write anymore. Chen Pinggan forced himself to take a deep breath. He raised his arm and wiped the sweat from his forehead. He wanted to squat down and continue writing, even if it was just one more word. However, just as he bent down, he sat down on the ground. Chen Pinggan casually placed the blade-strengthening gourd on the ground with one hand and loosened his fingers with the other hand. The remaining charcoal rolled to the ground. He just lay on his back on the ferry. Confucianism proposes compassion and Buddhism advocates compassion. However, in this world, it's still very difficult for us to do so, not to mention to do these two sayings all the time. On the contrary, the pure heart of a child that was first mentioned by the quasi-sage and the Daoist ancestors returning to one's original state, returning to one's infant state seemed to be more. Chen Pinggan tried his best to stand up and leave the circle that hadn't been completed yet. He stared at the big circle and finally focused his gaze on the center of the circle, where he first wrote the two words good and evil. Chen Pinggan shakily reached out a hand as if he wanted to grab the whole circle. He almost didn't know what he was saying. At this moment, he had forgotten all about his body and bones. Can we not even talk about good and evil? Only talk about the difference between gods and humans? Nature. Otherwise, it's still very difficult for this circle to really stand. Does this need to be raised? Not restricted by the principles in books and not restricted by Confucianism, but purely to expand this circle? But to raise it a little higher? If that's the case, then I understand. It's not like what I thought before. It's not that there's a threshold for the principles of the world and there's a difference between high and low. Instead, it's walking around this circle and constantly looking. It's that there's a difference in one's nature. Similarly, it's not that there's a difference in one's heart and there's a difference between heaven and earth. Therefore, what the saints of the three sects do is to move mountains and overturn seas and guide the hearts of people from different territories to the areas they want. If we don't look up first and don't walk in circles on flat ground, but only take a step back with the help of order, and don't mention all kinds of original intentions, and only say that the true nature of the world exists, Confucianism is expanding and stabilizing the territory of material things, while Taoism is lifting up this world so that we can be higher than all the other sentient beings. Chen Pinggan closed his eyes and took out a bamboo slip. There was a desolate but still beautiful and moving text engraved on it. At that time, he just felt that the idea was strange but clear. Now, it seemed that as long as he looked deeper, it actually contained some true meaning of Taoism. A basin of water overturns the ground. Mustard floats in the water. Ants attached to mustard seeds. They think they're in a desperate situation. When the water dries up, they find that the road is clear and there's nowhere they can't go. What Taoism seeks is not for us people to be existences with low temperaments like ants. We must look at the world from a higher place. We must be different from the birds, beasts, flowers, and trees of the world. Then what about Buddhism? Chen Pinggan stretched out his hands and drew a circle. With the breadth of Confucianism and the height of Taoism, the world of 10 directions will be integrated into one. There will be no omissions. Chen Pinggan finally murmured, "Do I know a little bit about the one?" With a bang, the accountant, who had exhausted all his strength and spirit, leaned back and closed his eyes. His face was full of tears. He reached out and wiped his face. Then he stretched out a hand and raised it slightly. His vision was hazy with tears. Through the gaps between his fingers, he was muddle-headed. He was about to fall asleep, but he was already extremely exhausted. However, the deepest part of his heart was full of joy. He murmured, "Who embellishes the sky when the clouds disperse? The color of the sea is originally clear." Chen Pinggan closed his eyes and slowly fell asleep. With a smile at the corner of his mouth, he whispered, "It turns out that I can also smile without dividing people into good and evil." When Chen Pinggan first came to the Bookslip Lake, he openly lay on the ferry that had drawn a big circle and didn't have time to erase a charcoal word. He was sleeping soundly on the Green Canyon Island. No one knew when. There was a man in a cyan robe who was still unruly and an increasingly attractive girl in a cyan robe with a ponytail almost at the same time. They didn't say anything. They didn't even look at each other. The scholar, who didn't write a letter in the Hall of Ancestral Masters of Taiping Mountain but came to another continent in person, picked up Chen Pinggan's charcoal and squatted at the leftmost place under the circle. He wanted to write but hesitated. However, instead of being annoyed, his eyes were full of smiles. "There is a high mountain in front of me. Do you want me, a gentleman of the academy in the past, to take a detour?" The girl in a cyan robe stood outside the circle at the end of the straight line, eating the new pastries from Green Tong City by the Bookslip Lake. She said vaguely, "There is still a little difference between God and man. It hasn't been explained thoroughly." The scholar held the charcoal in his hand, raised his head and looked around. He said, "What a good saying that when faced with difficulties, one must be bold. What a good saying that when drunk, one's courage is still open." The girl in a cyan robe also said, "If one's heart is not hidden, all the laws will be clear." He then turned to look at the girl in a cyan robe with a single ponytail who was nibbling the pastries. "Don't take advantage of Chen Pinggan when he is asleep. But if you must do it, I, Zhong Kuei, can turn around. This is called a gentleman has the beauty to help others." She then looked at him and asked in confusion, "You are Zhong Kuei? You are a person, ghost. You are strange. I can't understand you." Zhong Kuei reached over his shoulder and pointed to the accountant who was snoring like thunder. "This guy understands me, so I am here." Zhong Kuei looked at the Bookslip Lake, which was different from others in his eyes, and muttered, "How can I be the only gentleman in the world? How big a cesspool is the world?" Ruan Xiu looked indifferent. "I know you want to help him, but I advise you not to stay to help him. You will be more of a hindrance." Zhong Kuei asked, "Really?" Ruan Xiu asked back, "Do you believe me?" Zhong Kuei nodded. Ruan Xiu finished eating the pastries, clapped her hands and left. Zhong Kuei thought for a while and gently put the charcoal back to its original place. He stood up and wrote 8 words in the air on the Bookslip Lake. Then, he left and returned to Tongya Continent. Zhong Kuei, who was no longer the gentleman of the academy, came in high spirits and returned in high spirits. The words he left were, "Everything is appropriate, nothing is forbidden." 437. In the tall building of Pondwater City. As the imperial tutor of Dali, Kui Dong had already put aside 3 flying sword messages and ignored them. Kui Dongshan walked slowly along the edge of the Golden Thunder Pool with his hands behind his back. He asked, "What's the meaning of what Zhong Kuei wrote? What did Ruan Xiu see?" Kui Dong replied with a few questions and dismissed Kui Dongshan. "Do you think I'm a Dao ancestor? The final truth of all deductions requires a large amount of information to be gathered. Don't you have this bit of common sense?" Kui Dongshan was even more ruthless. "I'm just looking for something to talk about. Do you really take it seriously?" Kui Dong received another extremely hidden flying sword message. Like all the previous flying swords, it did not fly from the sky above the Book Lake. Instead, a spring appeared in the tall building. Then, the spring water gurgled and the flying sword broke through the air. Then, the spring water disappeared. This was naturally one of the top secrets of Dalis military. It took a lot of effort from Dalis Mohist cultivators and, of course, a shocking amount of divine money. Kui Dong still did not open the flying sword. He said slowly, Humans are the foundation. Let's not talk about ghosts and demons first. As the saint of the academy who oversees a continent, he must have a certain height. Then, he must think about the world and think about things outside of humans. This is higher than the knowledge of a gentleman. A gentleman only needs to benefit the land of a country and then scheme for a continent. Therefore, a gentleman's foundation lies in humans. Kui Dong said again. Chen Pinggan wanted to go beyond the scope of this circle. Let's not talk about knowledge and only talk about size. The rest is similar to the Qinghuan country's governor Wei Liang, who proposed that the world's laws must be based on humans. This means that the world's laws are not applicable to all ghosts and demons. Kui Dongshan asked, so you see legalism's disciple Wei Liang as half of your kindred spirit? Kui Dong nodded and said, before reaching the end of the road, different roads lead to the same destination. Moreover, it complements the Great Way. Kui Dong turned around and smiled. Oh right, why didn't you ask me to help you hide the fairies' weather? Aren't you afraid of attracting unnecessary attention? Kui Dongshan continued to walk around the Golden Thunder Pool and casually said, no need. After all, this is something that we can all understand, not to mention the old scholar who participated in 2 debates between the 3 religions. Chen Pinggan's knowledge wouldn't scare anyone to death. What could really scare people to death is the old scholar's words that directly scared the Buddha's golden body of the spiritual altar and the pure heart of Taoism. Kui Dong seemed to agree with this statement. Chen Pinggan was halfway up the mountain. He held a lantern in his hand, and the light from the lantern swayed, illuminating the path beneath his feet. You and I don't count, so the benefit is not great. It's a pity that only Zhong Kuei and Ruan Xiu will be able to see it. Kui Dongshan stopped and glanced at the landscape painting on the ground in front of Kui Dong. He sneered and said, the rest of the people saw it and felt it was an eyesore. They couldn't understand it at all. Fortunately, they understood half of it. But the leftmost hand in the upper semicircle made them feel more guilty. Chen Pinggan could see through the world's affairs and people's hearts. Jiyu Kan, what do you think about the gatekeeper of the Verdant Gorge Island? They will only be more irritated. So, it is at least half right to say that the joys and sorrows of life are predestined. They should be like ants rolling in the mud for their whole life. They should be able to climb out of the dung pit when they see a little light. They will naturally climb out and shake off the dung. They will change from a bumpkin in terms of external appearance to an elegant young master in terms of temperament, such as Liu Baixiang. Kui Dong's expression was calm and relaxed. This pair of old fox and little fox, who were originally one person with separated souls, chatted casually from the beginning to the end. They seemed to have a tacit understanding. They were intentionally or unintentionally lowering the height and significance of Chen Pinggan's fairy circle. Then they were silent. Kui Dong began to open the 4 messenger flying swords one by one. Because the amount of money needed to support such a flying sword to wander between the gaps of the long river of time was extremely huge, the length of each matter in the letter was often not long. The wording was as concise and to the point as possible. This was also one of the results after Kui Dong became the imperial tutor of Dali and focused on managing the complicated direction of the officialdom. He tried to say something that everyone could understand between the civil and military officials of Dali. Kui Dong seemed to be dealing with busy government affairs. Kui Dongshan was caused by telepathy. He repeatedly recited a sentence in his heart. Once, an old scholar and a great bodhisattva who traveled far and wide in the world privately discussed Taoism. They mentioned a sentence, a big talk. My heart is bright. What else can I say? After Kui Dong dealt with all the military and political affairs in an orderly manner, he replied to the letters one by one. Then, Kui Dong sat down quietly and immersed himself in his mind with the internal vision method. The nascent soul of Kui Dong sat on the ground in his natal acupoint and twisted the trajectory of the straight line of the fairy circle, turning it into the pattern of the yin-yang fish that the Tao ancestor had drawn in the mortal world back then. Then, he stretched out his hand and waved his sleeve, gently pushing the circle to the side. Then, he looked at the original circle again, looking at the territory that had been cut into 6 large pieces. 6 pieces. Chen Pinggan had mentioned that he once did not look at it from high to low, but walked in a circle. That was only the left and right. Moving mountains and seas, moving people's hearts. This was called the endless cycle of reincarnation. The more Kui Dong's nascent soul of mind looked, the colder its face became. Kui Dong suddenly pulled his mind out and opened his eyes. In one of his sleeves, 2 fingers quickly formed a seal, starting with the word Yarrow. At some point after that, Kui Dong Shan, Kui Dong, one old and one young, almost at the same time, called out each other's name. Kui Dong Shan quickly took out the time horse map that he had once shown to Pei Qian and spread it on the ground. Kui Dong quickly came to the edge of Kui Dongshan's golden lightning pool and said in a deep voice, "Only pick out the scene of the dragon kill head surnamed Yarrow. All of it." Kui Dongshan flew into a rage out of humiliation and said, "That old Yang is even more of an old bastard than you. He must have purposely hidden all of old Yang's tracks and deceived everyone. Our previous little bit of careless deduction was simply leading old Yang into a smelly ditch. Mother **K. This was definitely a deal between old man Yang and Yarrow. Kui Dong, you and I can't make wedding clothes for others. I, Kui Dong, can be forced to death by the Confucian lineage and crushed to death by the power of the world, but absolutely cannot be killed by stupidity." In a moment of desperation, Kui Dong Shan didn't even care about his mistake in calling himself Kui Dong. The more Kui Dong Shan thought about it, the crazier he became. He directly began to curse. Is Qi Jingchun blind? Isn't his chess skill so high that even the city lord of White Emperor City regarded him as a rival? In the first 59 years of Lizhu Grotto Heaven, Qi Jingchun was only disappointed in him. But after he decided to entrust the most important part of his disappointment to Chen Pinggan, why didn't he do anything about it? Let it go and turn a blind eye to it? I knew that the Buddhist school, as the one who collected the rent of Lizhu Grotto Heaven for 3,000 years, would definitely not be so simple. Maybe that ascetic monk was just a trick. Compared to Kui Dong, who was flustered and exasperated, Kui Dong was much calmer. He asked, "What are the real names of the 2 flying swords on Chen Pinggan's body before the names Chu Yi and 15? Kui Dongshan frowned and said, "I only know that the sword Chen Pinggan named Chu Yi was given to Chen Pinggan after the old scholar walked out of the painting of mountains and rivers in the old scholar's painting in Huangting country. The second flying sword, 15, was given to old Yang, a 10,000-year-old bastard who was almost as old as the stinky cow's nose in Donghai. He asked Chen Pinggan for some worthless junk and gave it to Chen Pinggan in exchange. Old Yang said that it was called 15, but it was obviously a bullshit name made up by Chen Pinggan for Chu Yi." Kui Sha lowered his head and stared at the fragments of images that he had extracted from the painting of the River of Time with a unique secret technique. Kui Dongshan pointed outside the building and scolded, "Qi Jingchun is blind, and the old scholar is also crazy." Kui Dong said indifferently, "Who was the one who tried so hard to make Chen Pinggan study Buddhist scriptures?" Kui Dongshan spat outside the golden thunder pool and flew towards Kui Dong's head. **CK off, if you didn't set up this trap to trap me and my disciple, I wouldn't have let Chen Pinggan study the serious scriptures of the 3 religions and 100 schools." Kui Dong didn't raise his head. He waved his sleeve and the spit hit Kui Dongshan's face. Kui Dongshan casually wiped his face and felt indignant. He was still cursing the heavens and earth. He finished looking at all the images of the old man Yarrow that Chen Pinggan spoke of for the second time. Kui Dong said softly, "Don't forget, there's still that locust tree leaf with the character Yarrow that Qi Jingchun asked for. A locust tree has so many ancestral locust tree leaves, but only one of them fell. Take out this section of the River of Time and let us take a look." Kui Dongshan did as he was told. When it came to important matters, Kui Dongshan was never awkward or pretentious. In the painting, after Qi Jingchun asked for the only locust tree leaf that was willing to leave its branch for Chen Pinggan, he once quietly turned his head and looked at the highest point of the locust tree leaf. His smile was somewhat mocking. Qi Jingchun looked at this point. But it just so happened that many years later, when the 2 of them were overlooking the painting, the 3 of them looked at each other as if they were separated by the River of Time. Coincidence? On purpose? Kui Dongshan was horrified. Kui Dong's face was gloomy. Kui Dongshan muttered, Is Qi Jingchun mocking those old ancestors of the locust tree surname for not having eyes, or is he mocking the two of us for not being able to guess what he's doing? Or perhaps both? Kui Dong kept his mouth shut. He slowly pondered and calculated this matter in his heart. Kui Dongshan sat down on the ground and howled. Just what have we done? Old bastard, your cultivation is higher than mine, you're older, you've eaten more weights. Why don't you tell me? Right now, my heart is filled with panic. It's just like my teacher's heart is dried up, almost unable to write at the ferry. Right now, my heart is also tired, I can't scold you. Kui Dong pretended to be deaf and mute. Kui Dongshan scratched his head with both hands. These days are hard. Teacher is worried, and so is this student. We can't enjoy the blessings together, but we have to endure the misfortune together. There's no way to pass it, no way to pass it. Kui Dong suddenly laughed. You're even more afraid of Qi Jingchun than I am, so I know that at the beginning of this situation, you hoped more than I did that Qi Jingchun was dead. But now, have you changed your mind? Do you hope that Qi Jingchun can come back and haunt us again? Kui Dongshan was silent. Kui Dong pointed at the painting of horses. Put it away. There's no point in thinking too much about it. Right now, there's no meaning in trying to guess Qi Jingchun's intentions. Kui Dongshan moved his butt, inching to the side of the painting of horses. He slapped Qi Jingchun's face on the painting, but it was not enough to vent his anger. He slapped it twice more. Is there a junior brother in the world who schemes against their senior brother like you? Huh. Come, if you have the guts, come out and say something. Let's see if I don't quarrel with you. Kui Dong said, don't you feel ashamed? Kui Dongshan angrily put away the painting of horses. Kui Shi changed the topic. Since you mentioned the quarrel, do you remember that there was a time when the old elementary scholar won a quarrel between Buddhism and Taoism? When he returned to the school, he wasn't very happy. Instead, he drank some wine and lamented to us. He said that in the distant past, those unknown people in the history books met the sage master and the sage of rights on the road. They dared to argue about their own principles and were not afraid. When they understood something, they laughed heartily. When they felt that something was wrong, they argued loudly. I remembered very clearly that when the old scholar was saying these words, his expression was even more enthusiastic than when he was debating with Buddhism and Taoism. Why is that? Kui Dongshan said angrily, the old elementary scholar's heart is higher than the sky. Kui Dong asked a long series of questions in one breath. Why is it that learning to read is getting easier and easier compared to ancient times, but people are more and more in awe of the teachings of the saints and sages? The disciples of Confucianism actually feel that their knowledge is not as high as that of the sages, and that today's people are destined to be inferior to the ancients. Why is it that there is more and more knowledge in the world, but the temperament of the people of the future is getting shorter and shorter? Kui Dongshan sighed. Probably when our lives get better and better, we become slower and slower in our treatment of the world, just like those high and mighty gods of the past. Kui Dong narrowed his eyes. For us, as long as we can survive the coming catastrophe, isn't that a good thing? Kui Dongshan's face stiffened. Kui Dong sneered. Are you regretting it? Kui Dongshan trembled all over. This was an unprecedented thing for the carefree and lawless white-clothed youth. Kui Dong suddenly stood up. You found a good teacher. Other people, such as this book slips Lake's trash. Even if that stinky cow's nose was thrown into the river of time in Lotus Blossom Blessed Land, not to mention 300 years, even if they looked at it for 3,000 years, they still wouldn't be able to see anything. Kui Dongshan was puzzled. Why are you saying this? Every time you say something nice, I panic. Kui Dong looked at the moonlit lake outside the building. Now that Dali has a lot of things to do, I can't stay here every day to receive the most important flying sword messages. It will delay our important matters. I'm different from you. Chen Pinggan can't pass this hurdle, so you will be implicated. I've long been in an invincible position. Therefore, it's not without reason that you and I have different priorities. Kui Dongshan did not seem to be surprised by Kui Dong's departure and did not say anything. Kui Dongshan's eyes quietly turned. Kui Dong's back faced Kui Dongshan. I advise you to show some backbone. Don't think about playing some dirty tricks while I'm not here. If you do that, I will be very disappointed in you. Kui Dongshan, who was sitting on the ground, lightly waved his sleeve, as if he was sweeping the floor. Kui Dong said, "Before I leave, if you have any questions, ask them quickly." Kui Dongshan was not polite and immediately asked, "Are you really going to let Liu Larocheng kill Ji Yukan? Are you not going to do anything?" Kui Dong shook his head. "In any case, it has nothing to do with a dead end. I'm not Chen Pinggan. Why should I care about the life and death of a brat? If he kills Ji Yukan, Liu Larocheng will still have to do business with our Dali. At most, he will change from Liu Jimao to Liu Larocheng. Look, even the surname is the same. In fact, it's better this way. Liu Jimao can't convince the public. His style of doing things is no different from the corrupt dynasty's officialdom. It's better to change to Liu Larocheng. This person knows the general situation better. If he cooperates with our Dali in the future, it will be very convenient. He won't be like Liu Jimao, who is very likely to fall into a quagmire. After gaining benefits, he will be powerless to do things. It's easy for him to be a coward. Maybe he will even give Liu Jimao a chance to raise the price. Therefore, even if Liu Larocheng becomes the ruler of Jianghu and asks for a higher price, Dali will inevitably lose more in the early stage. But in the long run, Dali can still earn back the money." Kui Dongshan hurriedly asked, "If, and I'm saying if, Qi Jingchun is really haunting us and comes after you leave, what will you do?" Kui Dong replied, "Of course I have a backup plan. In the dark place of Book Lake, just like in Liju Grotto Heaven, Taoism left Master Lu there. I'm not you. If I say something, I can do it. Don't guess. Once you cross the line and don't follow the rules, I have other backup plans to deal with you." Kui Dongshan was silent. This time, he waved his two sleeves and swept the floor. Kui Sha lamented, "A man's virtuous is like a rat's, his ears are everywhere. Rats will never know that they are stealing when they move the food." He turned his head and asked with a smile, "Then what about us? Attaining immortality. If there's an unknown existence at a higher place and it's looking at us, what are we doing?" Kui Dongshan muttered, "Why are you asking me when you've already figured it out? Isn't it because we have to figure it out that we chose to do that thing?" Therefore, among the 4 people in the lotus flower-blessed land painting, the most interesting one, Zhu Lian, observed the fire from the other side of the river and came to the correct conclusion. He said that you and I are the ones who see the fish in the abyss. Kui Dong laughed, "I'm afraid you'll become the next Ji Yukan. You're forgetful." Kui Dongshan rolled his eyes. Kui Dong smiled and said, "Qi Jingchun and I, Liju Grotto Heaven and Bookslip Lake, both times were gentlemen's disputes." Kui Dongshan's expression was strange. Kui Dong said, "If you have doubts, it means that I have also doubted myself this time. But I'm telling you now, it's a gentleman's dispute." Kui Dongshan asked again, "Qi Jingchun can watch Zhao Cheng switch to another lineage. After all, it's within the Confucian school. Qi Jingchun can also leave 3 books for Song Jisin to explain the essence of legalism for Song Jisin. After all, the dispute between Confucianism and legalism isn't excessive. But if Qi Jingchun pushes Chen Pinggan to Buddhism and Chen Pinggan doesn't turn back, what's going on?" Even if Qi Jingchun was overseeing Liju Grotto Heaven and had a lot of deep thoughts about Buddhism, I don't think he's really escaped from Zen. I firmly believe in this. Then, is Chen Pinggan really Qi Jingchun's junior brother? Is he Li Baoping, Zhao Yarou, and Song Jisin's disciple or protector? Or is he Qi Jingchun's true successor? Or is he nothing at all? Kui Dong laughed and said, "I don't know." Kui Dongshan muttered, "I knew it." Kui Dong said to Kui Dongshan as if he was a senior teaching a junior, "Little brat, don't say I admit defeat to anyone in the future. It's easy to lose one's spirit and qi, but difficult to regain it. A chess player admits defeat in his heart and just throws the pieces on the board. Who would say I admit defeat?" Kui Dongshan's interest waned. "Don't tell me what to do. We're not the same person anymore." Kui Dong didn't put away the picture scroll on the ground. Naturally, he left it to Kui Dongshan. He finally smiled and said, "Now you should sigh with emotion. My master has a lot of worries." Kui Dongshan didn't refute. Instead, he echoed, "Looking at the green hills from afar, it's hard to walk on the mountain road. There are even mountain bandits on the road. Quisha took a step forward, as if passing through a door, and disappeared in a flash. After confirming that Kui Dong had really left, Kui Dongshan raised his hands and rolled up his sleeves. A chessboard and 2 pots of colored cloud seeds appeared in front of him. He sat upright and still, looking solemn and serious. He started playing Gamoku. Chen Pinggan hurried from Dali to Bookslip Lake around the time of the autumn equinox. When he arrived at the territory of Bookslip Lake, he took a carriage to the lakeside pond city. The scenery he saw along the way was clear mountains, clear water, frost at night, and several dark red trees with light yellow. After that, he saw Jiyu Kan. After seeing the cool autumn scenery of Jianghu in Verdant Canyon Island, the dew gradually became thicker and thicker. Bookslip Lake was cold and long at night. The wind was bleak and mist filled the air. Chen Pinggan went to Yunlu City. With the help of the father and daughter, he went to the border pass of Shahao country. He saw the line and saw a different scenery. Frost grass, green insects, and people in the north and south of the village. After returning to Verdant Canyon Island, winter came quietly. The water began to freeze and the ground began to freeze. The pheasants turned into fish when they entered the water. When traveling around many islands, Chen Pinggan took half a day to stay in Jinji Island because he knew the history and customs of Bookslip Lake in detail. However, this kind of scene was extremely rare. He could only rely on his luck. Just like when Chen Pinggan encountered a mountain carp, he could only wait for a long time before he had the chance to find the golden mountain carp. Chen Pinggan could not spend too much time trying his luck. He had to leave resentfully and regretfully. People could not suffocate themselves to death. They had to find some joy in the bitterness and find some ways to relieve their worries. He hoped to see the scene of the pheasants entering the water. It was the same with the story he asked the gatekeeper Hong Su in Verdant Canyon Island. After arriving at the Verdant Gorge Island, Chen Pinggan rarely drank. Instead, he would occasionally take a sip or two to refresh himself. The old year was approaching dusk. The cold wind surrounded the withered branches and the birds flew swiftly. Just when Chen Pinggan mistakenly thought that he would continue to move slowly like this, the people of Gong Willow Island continued to be noisy. On the other hand, he was quiet and buried in his work. Perhaps one day when he looked up, he would see the willow trees turning yellow and the hydrology turning green. Suddenly, one day, the people of Gong Willow Island stopped arguing. Jiyu Kan returned to the mountain gate with Little Loach and found Chen Pinggan, who was studying a secret skill taught by Wei Pai. She told him that it had been decided. Among the opposing forces, the island owners of Qingzhong, Tianlaro, and Grain Millet Islands, who had the loudest voices, were previously clamoring for the two sides to send 3 or 5 people each. The winner would recommend the candidate to be the sovereign of Jianghu. However, when Verdant Canyon Island was about to agree, the old island owner of Qingzhong Island and a chief executive of Tianlaro Island, the two most promising powerful earthly immortals, disappeared inexplicably overnight and completely disappeared. The situation took a turn for the worse. The island owner of Grain Island tried to maintain the situation. He went to Gong Willow Island alone and personally found Liu Zhimao. After a secret discussion, they should have reached an agreement. Just like that, Liu Zhimao ascended to the throne of Jianghu effortlessly. It should be known that, including his disciple, Lord Tianhu, the bigwigs of more than 10 vassal islands were all prepared for a bloody battle. In a battle that was destined to be incomparably cruel and bloody, anyone could die. However, Liu Zhimao and Jiyu Kan were definitely not among them. Everyone was well aware of this, so they did not complain too much. It was not that they did not have resentment, but the general trend was such that it was beyond their control. Perhaps immortal Jiang Jie would laugh out loud in his sleep. Chen Pinggan did not relax after hearing the news. There were some things that he could guess. For example, Grain Island was most likely a pawn of the Song clan. The heavy losses on Green Tomb and Heavenly Grandma Island were secretly caused by the imperial tutor, Kui Dong. However, there were some things that Chen Pinggan could not guess. For example, did the Zhuiying dynasty have a backup plan? If so, who would it be? When the time came, Would the thunderous strike that would try to turn the situation around be targeted at Liu Zhimao, Jiyu Kan, and Little Loach? Or would they simply retreat in the face of difficulties? The Zhuang dynasty, which was surrounded by the smoke of war at the border, was already too busy to fend for themselves. Would they simply abandon the useless Book Lake? Perhaps even the potential influence of Li Mu's presence on Green Canyon Island was in the calculations of Embroidered Tiger. Was this what they meant by making the best use of everything? Chen Pinggan only asked Jiyu Kan not to go out easily during this period of time, in case of the crazy counterattack of the Zhuang dynasty. Jiyu Kan nodded with a smile. Liu Zhimao also reminded him not to be complacent recently. No matter who the party was, he could not attend. He only needed to wait for 2 or 3 months. By then, no one would dare to stop him even if he went to the door of the ancestral hall on Green Tomb Island and Heavenly Grandma Island to pee. Therefore, Liu Zhimao was particularly cautious. Even the banquet to celebrate his ascension was deliberately postponed to the beginning of spring next year. He was afraid that when the verdant Canyon Island opened the mountain and rivers formation, the people who came to congratulate him would be mixed with the good and the bad. If they really stabbed him at that time, the verdant Canyon Island would suffer a great loss. Chen Pinggan and Jiyu Kan sat on the left and right of the small bamboo chairs and chatted for a while. In the middle of winter, there were almost no birds on the lake except for a few. It should be snowing soon. After Jiyu Kan left, Chen Pinggan walked to the ferry and pondered in silence. At dusk on this day, Chen Pinggan suddenly looked up from the writing desk and walked quickly to the window. Outside Green Canyon Island, an old cultivator hovered in the air and sneered, "My name is Liu Larocheng. I am here to meet Jiyu Kan. Those who have nothing to do with it, get out. Otherwise, whoever helps you to collect your corpses will have to die until no one can collect your corpses." Before he finished his words, the old cultivator had already waved his sleeves. Pieces of yellow paper talismans glowing with golden light flew out in a continuous arc and finally formed a big circle, as if the whole verdant Gorge Island was strangled by its neck. Beside the old cultivator, a golden body with a height of 100 feet appeared. It was wearing a strange black flame armor, holding a giant axe in one hand and a square head in the other. This square head was called the Gilt Fire Spirit Divine Seal. It was one of the most important natal items of Liu Larocheng, a cultivator of the upper 5 realms. In the Book Lake where water was prosperous, Liu Larocheng used this natal item of fire to kill many islands, and the bodies of cultivators floated all over the lake. Those high-quality barrier-breaking talismans kept shrinking the encirclement and embedded into the verdant Canyon Islands landscape tactical array. After the talismans shattered one by one, the mountain-guarding tactical array had a huge hole in it. If it were not for the divine coins that were piled up in the center of the tactical array and the efforts of Lord Tianhu and several trusted subordinates to maintain and repair the tactical array would have been shattered in an instant. Even so, the entire island began to shake and the spiritual chi was in chaos. This old cultivator, who had disappeared from the Book Lake for many years, did not say anything. The giant axe next to Liu Larocheng. It chopped down with its axe, and the mountain-guarding formation of the Green Canyon Island, which was known to be indestructible, collapsed on the spot. A black dot flew out of the Spring Court mansion and revealed its true form in the air. It turned into a giant dragon more than 300 feet long and crashed into the golden body of a Jade Realm cultivator. The flood dragon instantly wrapped around the golden body and smashed into the Book Slip Lake together, causing a huge wave to rise. The golden body did not fall to the ground after the crash. Its feet took root at the bottom of the lake and slid out. Because it was close to the Green Canyon Island, the lake was not too deep. The golden body of the golden body stood at the bottom of the lake and the lake water was only around its waist. A yank. It smashed into the dragon's head. It did not pull out the axe. This golden body smashed the dragon, whose body was much bigger than it, directly into the lake. It stepped on the dragon's head and chopped down with its axe. Liu Larocheng sneered. After getting such a big piece of the glazed golden body, he had not been idle recently. He had been stuck at the bottleneck of the Jade Realm for more than 200 years. Although he had not reached the immortal realm, he was not far away. Other than that, In order to deal with this nascent Soul Realm dragon, he had spent a lot of money, taking out a total of 90 grains of grain rain money to do something that was not cost-effective. That was to ask a great cultivator of the upper 5 realms to engrave a Taoist mantra on the axe: if you can't shoot a tiger, you have to practice your arrow. If you slay a dragon, you have to keep sharpening your sword. As for the word sharpening, it was very funny to use it on a giant axe. But these harmless things were not important to the cultivators of the mountains and lakes. As long as it worked. It was badly mutilated. The water in the book lake rolled and boiled rapidly. Blood flowed out from the dragon's wound, and the smell of blood filled the air. However, the dragon was a great demon known for its tough body. It was not completely powerless. After struggling desperately, it had thrown the golden body of the golden body into the water several times. Liu Larocheng reached out and grabbed somewhere in the Green Canyon Island. Countless cracks began to appear on the ground connecting the Spring Court Manor to the mountain. It was as if the old cultivator was going to pull it up from the ground with a single grab. Liu Larocheng looked over and sneered, "Still want to hide? I've found you." Liu Larocheng raised the palm of his other hand and then flicked his finger. A young man in a dark green robe was pulled into the sky above the mansion. He crashed into the mountain of the Green Canyon Island behind him as if he had been hit by a heavy hammer. Liu Larocheng did not need to look at the battle at the Book Lake. He looked away. "Liu Zhimao, what do you say? Your disciple is about to be killed by me. Why are you still so polite?" There was no response. Liu Larocheng twitched the corner of his mouth. "Since the Green Canyon Island is so polite, then I won't be polite." He stretched out 2 fingers and waved them forward gently. The seal that was slapped into the dragon's head by the golden body of the golden body flew out like a firefly and hit Jiu Kan, who was already deep in the mountain wall. Liu Larocheng smiled. "Oh, there's finally a man among the cultivators of the Green Canyon Island." In the field of vision, a young man in a golden robe was standing on 2 flying swords in the air in front of Jiu Kan. He stretched out his hand and a long golden line swept across the Spring Court mansion. He stretched out his hand and the sword fairy just hovered in his hand, but he did not really hold it tightly. In the face of the gilt fire spirit Dharma seal that scared all the older cultivators of the Slip Lake. The young man held the sword fairy. Above the Green Canyon Island, the wind and clouds were surging. Liu Larocheng frowned as a thought flashed through his mind. He didn't control his natal Dharma seal to collide directly with the young man and the tip of the quasi-immortal artifact. Instead, he made the fire spirit divine seal draw an arc and stop over 1,000 feet away from the young man. The cultivators of the mountains and lakes were decisive and ruthless. They calculated the gains and losses and haggled over the smallest details. Liu Larocheng soon relaxed his brows. If the famous accountant of the Green Gorge Island had completely refined the half-immortal weapon, it would be a little tricky. But since he had not completely refined it, it was not a big deal. On the top of a vassal island of the Green Canyon Island stood an elegant old man in a green robe and a short old man. They were all foreigners. The old sect master of the Jade Gui sect, Zun Yuan, and the old sect master of the Invincible Divine Fist Gang, Gao Mion. Gao Mion noticed the slight difference in Zun Yuan and asked, "Zun Yuan, is he someone you know?" Zun Yuan smiled and nodded. "Quite familiar. Besides you, he's one of the first people I met in the Aquarius continent. I met him in the old dragon city. He's a very good young man. Dumaro suffered a big loss in his hands. So, Liu Larocheng has to thank him for getting such a big piece of the glazed golden body." Gao Mion asked, "Do you want me to remind old Liu? Why do I feel that old Liu is doing something immoral and biting the hand that feeds him?" Zun Yuan smiled and shook his head. "There's no need to remind him. What kind of biting the hand that feeds him? Otherwise, besides Liu Larocheng, everyone in the Jade Gui sect, including me, will worship this young man like a living Buddha." Gao Mion grinned and said, "You really don't need to. Once old Liu gets excited, I won't be able to stop him. Unless you're willing to make an enemy out of a lower sect's chief consecrator for nothing." Zun Yuan said slowly, "That young man has a point of view that is roughly the same as yours and mine. In the Jianghu, One is responsible for one's own life and death. If that's the case, why should I save him and be tainted with so much worldly karma? Is it fun? Gao Mian glared at Zun Yuan. How dare you speak to me in such a manner, Zun? How dare you speak to me like that? Zun Yuan hurriedly cupped his fists and apologized. Gao Mian was finally satisfied. Looking at the confrontation over there, the outcome was set. As long as Liu Larocheng attacked again, not only would Jiyu Kan and the young man die, but there would also be no one to collect their corpses in the Bookslip Lake. Gao Mian sighed slightly. What a pity. Just by the fact that he's the only junior who dares to stop old Liu on the Green Canyon Island, I think is not a bad person. Zun Yuan said in a flat tone, old men like us who have lived for so many years have seen many pitiful things with our own eyes. Of the cultivators who died in our hands, other than those who deserved to be killed, were there any who had no choice but to die? Yes, there are, and there are bound to be many. This is called there are no ghosts who die unjustly. Gao Mian crossed his arms and curled his lips. Zun Yuan said slowly, to put it bluntly, the location of the Bookslip Lake is the most important matter of the Jade Gui sect. It's a great undertaking. If that young man and the Jade Gui sect have a battle of the great Tao, I don't mind being the second Du Maro. Du Maro foolishly relied on his cultivation and treated the Aquarius continent as a small place. He was completely unreasonable and made a move. But if I were to make a move, I would still be reasonable, and would still be doing things within the rules set by the Sage of Rights. Of course, whether we live or die in the end depends on our own abilities. We can't act like a woman and complain about being wronged. Gao Mian nodded. To be able to say such words, I have a whole new level of respect for you. Zun Yuan smiled. If Liu Larocheng wants to kill people to establish his might, he might have to pay a huge price. It's much bigger than you think. Gao Mian hit the nail on the head. Is it the younger one tonight, or the older one later? Zun Yuan said, tonight. Gao Mian was finally curious. Over at Azure Gorge Island. Chen Pingan twirled the talisman with 2 fingers and gently threw it out. The day and night wandering god true body talisman appeared. He then handed the golden demon binding rope made from Jiaolonggo's whiskers to one of the night wandering gods. Then, all of a sudden, Chen Pingan grabbed the unsheathed sword immortal. Liu Larocheng laughed, but his eyes were extremely gloomy. The entire Bookslip Lake is saying that you are a strange sword cultivator. No matter what, I still care about you, no less than Liu Zhimao. Let's see if you have the ability to make me lose money again. Liu Larocheng did not move. Drops of golden flames flowed down from the gilded fire spirit divine seal hovering in the air. Then, each drop of fire spirit golden liquid suddenly enlarged in the air, turning into pale golden armored soldiers holding various weapons. There were dozens of them. After landing on Verdant Gorge Island, they swarmed toward the 2 night wandering gods. Not only that, as if there were immortals drawing water from the Bookslip Lake, water pillars as thick as wells rushed out of the water and shot toward Chen Pingan. Chen Pingan held the sword immortal and swung it again and again. The pillars of water mixed with the golden sword chi and turned into fine powder in the air. Liu Larocheng was calm and unruffled. It was just a little bit of spirit chi. But the other party had to risk his life to break the water pillars that were as powerful as the largest arqueballista of the mortal dynasty. He also had to carefully divide his attention to guard against the sneak attack of his natal Dharma seal. Chen Pingan's hand that held the half-immortal weapon had been ground to the point where the bones of his fingers and palm could be seen. Liu Larocheng was like a cat teasing a mouse. From time to time, he would give the young man some unexpected surprises. For example, he would inexplicably knock out a rock from the cliff of Verdant Canyon Island. It could be as big as a pavilion or as small as a fist, and it could be as quiet as a rock. The more Liu Larocheng looked, the more interested he felt. The young man's expression was too calm. It was obvious that his body was withered and his heart was dry. All his essence energy was at the end of the road. He had died before he gave up. It was empty. Should he just kill him in one breath, or? It was rare for Liu Larocheng to have such hesitation. Liu Larocheng calculated the gains and losses in his heart, But he did not slack off at all. He wanted to see how long this young sword cultivator, whose soul could not bear the burden and was trembling uncontrollably, could last. Inside the scroll lake, the golden body Dharma form was holding a giant axe that could defeat a flood dragon. It was fighting with the big loach that was covered in wounds, causing the lake water to be filled with blood. The golden light of the 2-day and night wandering God true body talismans dimmed. The gilded fire spirit Dharma seal continuously dripped fire spirit golden liquid. There was no suspense about the outcome of these two battles. It was just that Chen Pinggan, who kept attacking with his sword, was almost surrounded by the golden threads of fireflies that did not disperse for a long time. Liu Larocheng looked at the young man who had not said a word from the beginning to the end. His killing intent gradually became stronger than his desire to kill. Chen Pinggan, who was holding the semi-immortal weapon with his skeletal hand, finally showed a dangerous flaw of stagnation of his qi. Liu Larocheng did not hesitate to slightly mobilize the spiritual qi in his almost bottomless sea of qi. Around Green Gorge Island, there was a loud rumbling sound, like thunder exploding on the lake surface. In an instant, hundreds of water columns rushed out of the water at the same time. Chen Pinggan took a deep breath. He said 2 words in his heart. Just holding the sword fairy. The water columns that left the Bookslip Lake continued to gather, besieging the man and the sword from all directions. It was like a green water ball as big as a mountain, trapping Chen Pinggan in it. After a while, the lake water froze and was still suspended in the air. The small figure of the young accountant had long disappeared. Including Green Gorge Island, thousands of cultivators, handymen and maidservants on dozens of vassal islands all thought that the young man was doomed. Further away, there were also countless people watching this soul-stirring battle. Some were relieved, some were gloating, but there were also a few cultivators and ordinary people. Even if these people did not know the accountant for too long, they still felt some regret. For example, Liu Zhongruan of Pearl Hairpin Island and some maidservants who had dealt with the accountant felt that Mr. Chen was not the same as ordinary immortals. Some people had mixed feelings, such as the ghost cultivator of Zhuxian Mansion, and some even felt sad, such as the gatekeeper Hong Su. In the air, on the surface of the huge green water ball, there was a slight cracking sound that could not be heard. A trace of golden threads was revealed. The sound became more and more intense, more and more shocking, like the sound of firecrackers in the marketplace on the first day of the first lunar month. Suddenly, on Green Gorge Island, it was like a winter rain. Liu Larocheng looked calm and asked the young man with ripples in his heart. After getting the answer, Liu Larocheng nodded. In the eyes of the trembling cultivators of Green Gorge Island, the accountant was still hanging in the same place and made a strange movement. He twisted his wrist and held the long sword upside down. He still did not speak, but faced Liu Larocheng and cupped his fists, as if to thank him. Liu Larocheng nodded. He put away the golden body Dharma form in the Bookslip Lake, as well as the natal yin. ZHA with Macron NG. Then he swept away. In the night, the 3 old men traveled together with the wind to Gong Willow Island. After the big battle, Liu Larocheng was calm and composed. This was the foundation of a cultivator of the upper 5 realms. Moreover, Liu Larocheng did not even use his real killing move. Once the golden body Dharma form revealed its recently refined half-azure glazed true body, it would be the time to kill. Gao Mion asked curiously, "Why didn't you kill the young man? It's not your style to cut the grass without removing the roots." Liu Larocheng said helplessly, "Your voice is so loud. You deliberately said it to me. I'm not deaf." Zun Yuan smiled but did not say anything. Liu Larocheng brought the 2 of them to the entrance of Gong Willow Island, and the 3 of them slowly walked forward. Liu Larocheng said, "Since it has something to do with the azure glaze golden body, I have to take this into account. Moreover, I have no direct conflict with a young man who can survive under Du Mao's hands, so I'll leave him some leeway. Killing people to establish my might, injuring people can also establish my might. It's about enough. Moreover, that kid was more tactful and made a deal with me." Gao Mion laughed and said, "Which is more, sentimental or fearful?" Liu Laocheng's face darkened. Zun Yuan suddenly said, If that young man didn't cup his fists at that time, old Liu would definitely have gone back on his word and killed him on the spot. Liu Larocheng nodded. I still have this bit of eyesight. I won't raise a tiger and invite calamity. I can tell whether that guy is sincere or not. Zun Yuan suddenly laughed and said, Do you believe that even in Bookslip Lake, Chen Pinggan can live longer than Jiyu can? Gao Mian shook his head and said disapprovingly, Not necessarily. It's one thing for me to acknowledge this person's character, but it's another thing to be in the martial world. Liu Larocheng nodded and said, That's the truth. A dog that bites doesn't show its teeth. There's a very important reason why I didn't kill him. Liu Larocheng looked around. In a place like Bookslip Lake, there are more so-called smart people. If there's someone who's willing to foolishly follow the rules and is capable enough, at least I, Liu Larocheng, can rest assured to do a big deal with him. Gao Mian ignored Liu Laocheng's heartfelt words and only heard one sentence. He said angrily, You mother f***er, you even flatter old Zun? Do you have any backbone? Why don't you ever flatter me? Zun Yuan's face was full of helplessness. Liu Larocheng squinted and said, I've seen you being beaten to a pulp. How would I dare to flatter you? I'm afraid that after I flatter you, it'll be a mess. Zun Yuan's eyes lit up. There's such a past. Tell me about it. Liu Larocheng was slightly embarrassed. A real man doesn't talk about his past achievements. What's there to talk about? Gao Mian laughed. In his early years, he met our Aquarius continent's only martial Dao master, who was the head of the Kui family. Without a word, he rolled up his sleeves and fought with him. After he was defeated, he was convinced. After that, he gave himself the nickname of Martial 10th Realm. But that martial artist went missing. I heard that he went to the Central Plains Divine Continent. I reckon that he ended up similar to this Martial 10th Realm martial artist. There's always a higher mountain. I don't know if he's dead or alive. Zun Yuan said, Pure martial artists. Everyone who can reach the 9th realm and touch the threshold of the 10th realm, all have great perseverance. Our Tongyi continent's martial fate is not good. It's actually not as good as your Aquarius continent. Isn't that strange? Gao Mian was straightforward. Strange my ass. Your Tongyi continent's martial artists are useless. How many 10th realm martial artists do you have? Do you have 2? Do you know how many there are in our Aquarius continent? If we include the one I admire the most, and the one who destroyed your Tongyi sect's ancestral hall, Li and the Dali vassal Song Jianqiang, there are 3. Liu Larocheng seemed to have understood something. Zun Yuan laughed. That was why he would become friends with this invincible God Fist gang leader. And the smarter Liu Larocheng would only become allies. The battle ended. Chen Pinggan carried Jiyu Kan and slowly descended the mountain. The day and night wandering God True Body talisman was already in his sleeves. The god light in the talisman was almost exhausted. The next time he invited the god down the mountain, in less than an incense's time, there was no need to fight, and it would dissipate. Jiyu Kan's face was covered in blood. His face was defeated, and he was heavily injured. But at least he survived. The dying flood dragon waved its tail and went further away. Finally, it sank to the bottom of the Bookslip Lake. Over there, it had secretly dug out the rough prototype of a dragon palace. Liu Larocheng displayed his might in Verdant Gorge Island. He was invincible among the cultivators of the 5 realms, and beat Jiyu Kan and the flood dragon to the brink of death. As the new ruler of Jianghu, Liu Zhimao, the owner of Verdant Gorge Island, did not appear from the beginning to the end. Instead, it was the bookkeeper who stopped Liu Larocheng. Finally, Liu Larocheng, who once had a famous saying that spread throughout Bookslip Lake, the island master of Willowgong Island, who personally said, "Kill until your heart softens, and you can't be lenient," actually showed mercy. For a time, the tens of thousands of wild cultivators in Bookslip Lake felt like they were looking at flowers in a fog. The more they looked, the more confused they became. On the mountain road, as little mud fish entered its nest and began to enter a dormant state, Jiyu Kan's injuries slightly improved. He hugged Chen Pinggan's neck and whispered, "Chen Pinggan, are you going to take little mudfish back?" Charcoal Snow is actually quite afraid of you. After all, you are Little Mudfish's real master. If she follows you, I don't worry about her being wronged. If it were someone else, I would rather Charcoal Snow die if I can't protect her. But if you take her away, I can accept it, and I definitely won't regret it in the future. You know my character. I mean what I say. You can keep it. Charcoal Snow is now by your side, so I can do my own things with peace of mind. Why? Aren't you afraid that Charcoal Snow will be an accomplice to a villain if she follows me? I used to get an immortal magic treasure in Tongia continent. It's a sword called Infatuation, also known as Eating Heart. It's called Eating Heart. It can be upgraded by stabbing it into the heart. At first, I was particularly disgusted. Not to mention using it to fight, I felt disgusted just by looking at it. Later, I finally understood that things are dead, but people are alive. A gentleman is not a tool, only then can he control all things. Forget it. You don't like to hear these reasons anyway. I won't say it. Say it. I don't know why, but I used to feel upset. Now that I listen to your nagging, I don't really take it in. It still goes in one ear and out the other, but it's quite pleasing to the ear. Chen Pingan, don't you think it's strange? Chen Pingan changed the topic. This is the second time. Ji Yukan replied, I know. The first time, you didn't leave Verdant Gorge Island. This time, you saved me. If it happens again, you won't care about me anymore and will only treat me as a stranger. Chen Pingan said indifferently, at least you know what's good for you. You have some conscience. Ji Yukan laughed, ha. Not much, only to my mother and to you, the two of you. I don't have much of an impression of that damn father of mine. I really can't get close to him. As for whether he will change his mind when we reunite and meet him, I don't want to think about it. Chen Pingan's voice became hoarser. Take it slow. Chen Pingan, I still want to know why you saved me this time. I know that you've always been disappointed in me. I know that. That's why I often bring little Loach to the door of the house. Even if there's nothing, I have to sit there for a while. Don't talk. I won't die for a while. Little Loach is already lying in its nest at the bottom of the water. I already feel better. Chen Pingan, tell me about it. I still want to hear your reason. Chen Pingan's Adam's apple moved slightly as he forcibly swallowed the blood. As long as Ji Yukan was willing to listen to him, he was willing to tell her. Chen Pingan, whose face was even paler than Ji Yukan's, was breathing rapidly. He gently inhaled and exhaled a few times. After he calmed down a little, he said in a hoarse voice, I've made a cut and a circle with you. This is a saying derived from chess and can also be used to practice swordsmanship. To put it simply, the former is like me moving out of Chunting Mansion and living in the house at the mountain gate. The latter is that I've been watching over you. As long as you don't go out of the circle where I don't think you've made any mistakes, I'll help you. I'll still be the neighbor you first met in Mudbottle Alley. What if I still kill innocent people when you arrive at Verdant Canyon Island? Will you leave? Or kill me? I'll try my best to stop you from making mistakes, just like how I stopped Liu Laocheng from killing you today. Moreover, I won't leave Book Lake. There are still many things waiting for me to do. It's not only for you, but also for myself. Aren't you tired of living like this? Back then in Mudbottle Alley, you lived a hard life as if you couldn't make it out of it for the rest of your life. Aren't you tired? It's tiring, but you've forgotten about it. But isn't the purpose of living a happy and satisfying life? As for this question that has come back to the beginning, of course I can give you my answer. But you might not listen to it, so I won't say it. So I hope you can leave Book Lake in the future and see the bigger Jianghu with your own eyes. By the way, I've taken in a disciple. She's a little girl called Pei Qian. If you leave Book Lake in the future, or if you return to Longquan County and I'm not around, you can look for her. I think the two of you will get along well. Well, maybe you won't see eye to eye with each other. Ji Yukan was a little happy, because this was the first time Chen Pingan talked to her about his relationship with Chen Pingan. Be together in the future. Ji Yukan said in a daze, Chen Pingan, I'm a little sleepy. Chen Pingan said softly, then sleep. You don't have to worry about what happens after that. I'm here. Ji Yukan tried her best not to fall asleep. She whimpered softly, Chen Pinggan, I'm afraid that you'll secretly leave Azure Gorge Island the moment I open my eyes. Chen Pinggan said, I won't. Ji Yukan's voice gradually became softer. Are you really not lying to me? Chen Pinggan asked back, when have I ever lied to you? Ji Yukan nodded gently and fell asleep. Ji Yukan had already fallen asleep. So she didn't notice that Chen Pinggan, who couldn't wipe his face, kept dripping blood on Ji Yukan's arm. In Spring Court Palace, Ji Yukan was lying on the bed. The woman sat by the bed, heartbroken. Lord Tian who brought the precious elixirs from Azure Gorge Island. But when she saw the accountant standing by the bed, her heart trembled and her hands trembled. Chen Pinggan glanced at the elixir bottle in her hand and said hoarsely, Is there any problem? Lord Tian who nodded vigorously, I guarantee it with my life. Chen Pinggan said, when you go back, tell Liu Zhimao that I'll be looking for him soon. Lord Tian who could only agree. After giving the unconscious Ji Yukan the elixir, Lord Tian who fled. The woman was flustered and could only murmur repeatedly, how could this be? How could this be? Chen Pinggan's movements trembled slightly. He moved a chair and sat beside her, asking back, why can't this be? The woman raised her head with tears in her eyes. She looked at the young man with a much thinner face. At this moment, she suddenly felt that he was so unfamiliar. Chen Pinggan asked again, do you still want to ask me if I deliberately watched Ji Yukan get seriously injured? The woman's gaze wandered. Chen Pinggan answered his own question, it's not like that. That's all I can do right now. The woman sighed. Her eyebrows were lowered and her face was full of tears. She nodded, I believe you, Chen Pinggan. At this moment, Chen Pinggan was a little sad. It had something to do with Ji Yukan and his aunt, but not much. That night at the ferry, he had actually figured out the crux of the problem. It was not difficult for Chen Pinggan to prove this point. He only needed to show one or two details in front of Ji Yukan without leaving a trace. For example, he valued a certain external object more than Ji Yukan's heart. The part of her heart that was related to Chen Pinggan would also be wasted. Very soon, it would become overgrown with weeds. In the end, given Ji Yukan's temperament, she might even turn against Chen Pinggan and become his enemy. Chen Pinggan did not want to verify or test people's hearts. Even if he knew the answer, what could he do? Putting aside everything and only talking about grievances and gains and losses, he was not afraid that Ji Yukan's view of him would change from a family member to an enemy. When Chen Pinggan was at ease, he was not afraid of the strength of any enemy's fist. Cai Qinqian and Fu Nanhua in the alley, then to the mountain-moving ape, and all the enemies on the road were the same. Chen Pinggan didn't want to lose Ji Yukan, who had come to this point for the sake of his mother, when he had already lost that little slug from back then. He did not want Ji Yukan to be as sad as he was. Was it true that the deeper a person thought, the more speechless he would be with others? Chen Pinggan sat on the chair, closed his eyes and rested for a moment, and then stood up. The woman asked nervously, Chen Pinggan, where are you going? Chen Pinggan said, as long as I'm in Qingxia Island, anywhere is the same. Aunt, don't worry. The woman wanted to say something but hesitated. In the end, she did not dare to force him to stay. As soon as Chen Pinggan walked out of Chunting Mansion, he immediately covered his heart with one hand and his mouth with the other. Taking a deep breath, he slowly walked to the house at the mountain gate. When he reached the house, he opened the door, closed the door, and lit the lamp on the table. Chen Pinggan sat on the bench with his back to the window. Trembling, he took out the ointment he bought from the Yang family pharmacy and swallowed it. He sat alone. On the table, there was the blade strengthening gourd. The flying swords number 1 and number 15 were at the door and the window respectively. It was hard to get close, hard to be intimate. Then there was disappointment. Sitting at home in the middle of the night, he should say that he was a traveler. There seemed to be hope. But in the end, there was still disappointment. After eating the ointment made by old Yang, Chen Pinggan, who had lost all feeling from his body to his soul, stared at the lamp in a daze. The lamp was getting thinner, and the sky was about to brighten. The young man, whose eyes were as still as an abyss, turned his head and looked out of the window. It was dawn. 18. 4:38. In the cold season, the lake water was vast and the cold air was bone-piercing. Ji Kan had been unconscious for 3 days and 3 nights. Chen Pinggan would sit beside the bed for a period of time every day, smelling the strong smell of medicine. Just like before, Ji Kan and Little Loach would go outside the house to bask in the sun. Chen Pinggan would sit by the bed from time to check on Ji Kan's pulse. After being ill for a long time, Chen Pinggan was not an outsider. He could tell if the injury had worsened or healed. The effect of the elixir that Liu Zhimao asked Lord Tianhu to bring was obvious. It was very likely to be similar to the rare elixir that Lu Yong of the Azure Tiger Palace refined for Earth Immortals. Ji Kan woke up one day and saw Chen Pinggan sitting on the chair. Ji Kan grinned, but soon fell asleep again. Her breathing had become much steadier. After Chen Pinggan left Spring Court residence, the woman hesitated for a moment and asked an old Dragon Gate cultivator to invite Liu Zhimao over, saying that she had something to discuss. The woman sat by the bed and gently held Ji Kan's hand, which was still a little hot, and was about to cry. The woman's mind wandered for a long time before she sighed softly. Fortunately, Kan's life was not in danger. It was a pity that the immortal rice that Spring Court residents had meticulously prepared was delayed. Cultivators were very particular about their food. The Yarrow family of the 100 Schools of Thought had contributed greatly in this matter. Food was the most important thing for the people. Qi cultivators, as mountain dwellers, were also suitable for this. With the 24 solar terms in a year as the approximate nodes, there was a complete set of seasonal medicinal supplements. It could benefit a cultivator's body and spirit. The medicinal supplements for cultivators were similar to the food supplements for wealthy families. Of course, if they wanted to be linked and benefit one's cultivation, they would need to do it day after day, year after year. Therefore, they had to be rich, very rich. The woman's eyes soon became determined. The resilience of an unfortunate woman in the face of life's hardships, the persistence of a mother worried about her son's future, and the shrewdness of a widow who had to be careful with every copper coin, were like the bricks and tiles that were pieced together to form the ancestral house in Clay Bottle Alley, sheltering the mother and daughter who depended on each other. She stepped over the threshold. There was a girl outside the door who wanted to help close the door, but the woman glared at her and quickly retracted her hand. The woman gently closed the door herself. In a luxurious living room of the Spring Court mansion, the woman saw true Lord Jiangjie, who had just taken a seat, the current sovereign of the underworld of Calligraphy Lake. He was Liu Zhimao, the otherworldly immortal who had single-handedly brought them out of Mud Bottle Alley. Liu Zhimao looked at the woman in front of him. She used to be a country bumpkin, but now she had become the female resident of the Spring Court mansion on the Green Gorge Island. 3 years had passed, but her beauty did not diminish. Instead, she looked more noble and her skin was like that of a young girl. Liu Zhimao also knew that the maidservants in the mansion said that she was now more noble than the madam of the Stone Hair Kingdom. The master. Maybe he could use this to control Ji Kan. As long as it brought her glory and wealth, she would do her best to cling onto it and hold it tightly in her hands. She would guard this family business and leave it all to her son in the future. That would be the best ally of the Verdant Gorge Island. He wasn't like now. His appetite grew bigger and bigger. He lived in Spring Court Manor, which wasn't any worse than a lord's manor, and he started to look at Liu Zhimao's Hengbo Manor. At the start, he tried to please Lord Tianhu and tried to figure out his thoughts. Now, he was still polite on the surface, but there was a sense of arrogance in his bones. Not only that, the village woman, who had become extravagant, even began to study. Not only that, she even began to touch the 4 arts. She even had a few young ladies from rich and powerful families teach her etiquette and red tape. This made Liu Zhimao amused. She was truly a wonderful person. But the regret in Liu Zhimao's heart disappeared as quickly as it came. Liu Zhimao smiled and asked, "Madam, do you want to talk to me?" The woman nodded and said, "I want to confirm something with you. Why did Chen Pinggan come to the Verdant Gorge Island?" Is it really not to take back the little loach from Kankan? Also, the little loach said that Chen Pinggan gave you a jade pendant. What's the origin of it? Liu Zhimao did not drink the tea. He gently placed the teacup lid to the side. Steam rose from the teacup as he smiled and said, "So that's what it is. I thought that Madam wanted to denounce me and ask why I, Jiyu Kan's master, didn't protect my disciple." The woman said, "Let's not talk about this. I believe you have your reasons, so you won't hold a grudge against me. I can also promise to help you and say something honest to Kankan, otherwise, wouldn't you be letting the wolves and leopards around you take advantage of you?" Liu Zhimao smiled. "Who said that women have long hair and short knowledge?" Liu Zhimao nodded and said, "That jade pendant has a great origin. It's not convenient for me to reveal it. As for the purpose of Chen Pinggan coming to the Book Lake, it's really hard to guess. To be honest, I don't understand it either. After I became the accountant of the Verdant Gorge Island, I was even more confused. But I believe that Chen Pinggan doesn't have any bad intentions toward Jiyu Kan." The woman frowned. She felt that Liu Zhimao was too coy today. In the past, Liu Zhimao would never be so sloppy when discussing secret affairs with her. Could it be that he had become the co-owner of the Book and Slip Lake after a few days of complacency, and was scared out of his wits by Liu Laocheng on the Green Canyon Island? Did he lose his sense of propriety after experiencing great joy and sorrow? Could it be that Liu Zhimao, such a fierce and ambitious person, was actually worse than a woman like her in temperament? Liu Zhimao narrowed his eyes and said with a smile, "Madam, you know better than me about Chen Pinggan's temperament. He likes to cherish old friendships and is devoted to Jiyu Kan, who he watched grow up. He can't wait to give all the good things to Jiyu Kan. But things are different now. People change after leaving the mud bottle alley full of chicken dung." Chen Pinggan probably joined the Confucian school, so he likes to reason with people. But he may not be suitable for the Book Lake. That's why he slapped Jiyu Kan twice in the pool water city. In my opinion, he only did that because he really cares about Jiyu Kan. If it were ordinary people, they would only be happy when they see their relatives and friends prospering and would not care about anything else. "Madam, let me give you an example. If it were Lvit Saisang, when he saw that Jiyu Kan was rich, he would naturally think that it was a talent and that it was a good thing to have a strong fist." The woman twitched the corner of her mouth. Liu Zhimao sighed, "Speaking of which, Chen Pinggan's idea is not wrong. It's just that he doesn't understand the Book Lake and doesn't know that the Jianghu here is dangerous. Fortunately, after staying here for a period of time, he should have learned some of the rules of the Book Lake, so he stopped pointing fingers at Jiyu Kan." "Madam, let's talk about the opposite again. It's obvious that for people like Chen Pinggan, talking about feelings is more useful than anything else. It varies from person to person, and it's appropriate for the place." The woman was deep in thought. She felt that Liu Zhimao's words were quite sincere. Before this, they were all polite and nonsense. She was indeed the woman who never lost in an argument in the small town. She understood it immediately. The woman was a little annoyed. According to Liu Zhimao's words, she did not do well from the moment she saw Chen Pinggan carrying Jiyu Kan back to Chunting Mansion that night until Chen Pinggan finally left the house. If she had listened to Liu Zhimao's words and the incident that night, she would not have done or said anything wrong. In the past 2 years, whenever she had free time, she liked to let the maidservants in the mansion rub her shoulders, pat her back, fan her to get rid of the heat, and hold a stove for warmth. She would also let a maidservant who was said to be the first daughter of the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights read the contents of various books. She had also listened to the great principles that the scholar officials and refined scholars held in high regard, but she did not like to listen to them. However, there were some allusions that often enlightened her. For example, she heard that a person's house was on fire. After hearing the news, he first asked if anyone was hurt and did not ask about the damage. This person immediately became famous among scholars and benevolent people. The woman realized that she actually had a chance and could use it. This was the best way to win people's hearts. There were also some famous meritorious generals who held high positions but were willing to suck pus for the soldiers. After that, all the soldiers in the army were willing to die for them. The woman had her own experiences. The woman wanted to slap herself. Liu Jimao's words were actually the principles in the books. She clearly knew it and remembered it in her heart. Why didn't she do it at the last moment? Liu Jimao noticed the woman's strange behavior and asked, "Madam, what's wrong?" The woman forced a smile. "Nothing. May I ask Senior Immortal, what should we do from now on? Will Liu Larocheng of Gongliu Island still be fierce to our Qingxia Island?" Liu Jimao comforted her. Liu Larocheng is a great hero in the history of our book lake. Even his enemies have to admire him. When he came to Azure Gorge Island, no one could stop him if he wanted to kill Jiyu Kan. However, now that he has already let Jiyu Kan go, no one can stop him. He can't change Liu Laocheng's decision, so there is no need for him to make another trip to Azure Gorge Island. Thus, Jiyu Kan and Spring Court Mansion are no longer in danger. In fact, I can even tell Madam that Jiyu Kan was truly out of danger after that night of killing. Now, in Book Lake, no one dares to kill a person that Liu Larocheng did not kill. The woman was still skeptical. Liu Jimao did not say anything. The woman in front of him did not say anything. He just let her think about it. No matter if it was the truth or not, as long as he said it too firmly, she would be suspicious and choose not to believe. The woman turned around and picked up the teacup. She lowered her head and drank the tea. Her posture and movements were graceful and elegant. Liu Jimao suddenly lowered his voice and asked, "Madam, why are you so worried about Chen Pinggan?" The woman's eyes were gloomy. "Senior Immortal, you just said that people change." Liu Jimao stroked his beard and smiled. The woman asked, "Senior Immortal, tell me, am I a bad person in Book Lake?" Liu Jimao shook his head. "Of course not. You are a good person. You are fair in rewards and punishments and you are not mean to servants." The woman asked, "Even bad people have occasional kindness. What I did to Chen Pinggan back then was just to give him a bowl of rice. Is it strange? I am guarding against Chen Pinggan now because of Kankan's marriage and cultivation. I am not going to harm Chen Pinggan. What is strange about that?" Liu Jimao suddenly understood. "I understand now that Madam has said so." The woman covered her mouth and laughed. Then, with a pair of watery eyes, she asked, "Is Senior Immortal looking down on the tea of our Spring Court residents? Is that why you are not willing to drink a single sip? If I remember correctly, these are tea leaves from the Rainbow Drinking Island personally sent by Lord Tianhu. Could it be that Senior Immortal has hidden better tea leaves?" "Madam, your words hurt me. All right, I will spend money to hire people to search everywhere and bring back a few pounds of tea leaves that are better than the ones from Rainbow Drinking Island." Liu Jimao pointed at the woman and laughed. He gently put the lid back on the teacup and left, telling the woman not to send him off. The woman stood up and sat back down. After pondering for a moment, she stood up and left. The old butler, who was standing far away at the courtyard door, hurried into the living room. Normally, he would let the servants clean up the mess. However, it was different today. The island lord was here, so he felt that he should clean it up himself. When the old cultivator put away Liu Jimao's cup of tea, there was no tea left. Only a few green tea leaves lay at the bottom of the cup. The old cultivator sighed. The island lord still trusted the Spring Court residents and Madam as much as ever. After leaving Spring Court residence, Liu Jimao returned to his own residence. He first sent someone to the capital of Zhuiying dynasty to buy a few pounds of the most expensive tea leaves. Senior Immortal Jiang Jie, who was most likely to reach the upper 5 realms, sat on a priceless table in a secret room. On the table, he opened his palm. There was a small ball of crystal clear water. He took out a white bowl from his sleeve and put the ball of water in it. He sat there until late at night. Then, Liu Jimao used his powers and appeared in front of the house at the mountain gate. He knocked on the door lightly. He pushed the door open and entered. Chen Pinggan had already walked around the desk and sat beside the table. He gestured for Liu Jimao to take a seat. It was both a good thing and a bad thing that the young man from Dali, who came from Clay Bottle Alley, did not scold him on the spot. Liu Jimao and Chen Pinggan sat opposite each other. He smiled and explained, "Earlier, Mr. Chen did not allow me to disturb you, so I had no choice but to be a host. Now that Mr. Chen said that you were looking for me, I did not dare to ask you to walk more than a few steps, so I came to visit. I hope Mr. Chen can forgive me for not informing you beforehand. As a nascent soul stage cultivator, and on the territory of the Verdant Gorge Island, he could be said to know when to yield or stand tall. Chen Pinggan was expressionless. He reached out his hand. Liu Zhimao quickly twisted his wrist. A crystal-clear jade pendant hovered above his palm. He did not dare to touch it. He pushed it gently and Chen Pinggan kept it. Liu Zhimao took out a bowl of water and pushed it towards Chen Pinggan. Finally, it stopped in the middle of the table. He smiled and said, Jiyu Kan's mother came to see me. I hope Mr. Chen can listen to her. Of course, my actions are despicable, but it can be considered as a show of sincerity. The surface of the white bowl rippled slightly. Soon, the sound of Liu Zhimao and the woman talking in the living room of Chunting Mansion could be heard. Unexpectedly, Chen Pinggan reached out his hand and covered the mouth of the bowl with his palm. He shattered the ripples and the white bowl with the echo water returned to silence. His other hand was the hand that held the semi-immortal weapon sword immortal that night. Even though Chen Pinggan had smeared the bottle of elixir that Lu Tai gave him, the elixir that could regenerate flesh and bones, it was still a ghastly sight. Liu Zhimao's face was filled with sincere admiration. He said, Mr. Chen, you are a true gentleman. I, Liu Zhimao, am measuring the heart of a gentleman with my own yardstick. Chen Pinggan retracted his hand and covered it with his hands. I know what kind of person she is and what she thinks. Maybe what she said was worse than I thought. But the moment I moved out of Chunting Mansion, her words and actions no longer have much to do with me. Liu Zhimao nodded to show that he understood. Chen Pinggan said slowly, back then at Mud Bottle Alley, in order to help Jiyu Kan, whom you chose, keep that little loach's opportunity, you used a secret technique to bewitch Cai Qinqian of Yunxiao Mountain. You also used a sinister divine skill to secretly engrave the words death wish in my heart. You lured me to assassinate Cai Qinqian and Fu Nanhua. It was like throwing an egg at a rock so that I would disappear completely. Liu Zhimao said, I admit that it did happen. I won't deny it. Mr. Chen, don't you have a semi-immortal weapon? You can stab me in the heart or in the head. I won't fight back. You and I will be even from now on. After that, if Mr. Chen still doesn't want to let me go, I'll give it a try. Chen Pinggan smiled. I've seen the way Book Lake does things again. I'll never get tired of it. There's something new every day. Liu Zhimao kept a straight face and didn't say anything. In fact, in Book Lake, other than Jiyu Kan and the woman, Liu Zhimao gave people the impression that he was a man of few words. He only smiled at everyone. Especially in the eyes of Lord Tianhu and the vassals like Yu Hui, Liu Zhimao's sanctimonious appearance and ruthlessness was a great deterrent. People who didn't speak much all year round were either simple and honest and not good with words, or they were full of schemes. That was why the old island master of Heavenly Granny Island who disliked Liu Zhimao the most, who was once the only level 8 sword cultivator in Book Lake, a pitiful worm whose soul had been destroyed, gave Liu Zhimao a harsh comment, fake perfected lord, smiling Buddha, Shura saber hidden in his sleeve. Chen Pinggan then did something that made Liu Zhimao's eyelids tremble. He lifted his hand that was wrapped in cotton from his sleeve and took off the blade strengthening gourd from his waist. He poured half a bowl of wuti wine into the white bowl in the middle of the table and pushed it back to Liu Zhimao. Chen Pinggan placed the blade strengthening gourd on the table and smiled. So what if I stabbed you? Let's not talk about whether it could hurt a perfected lord. Even if it could, a cunning rabbit has 3 burrows. I know that there's more than one death substitution method in the mountain. Liu Zhimao took the white bowl and drank the wine in it. Mr. Chen, you are talented and have great fortune. I, Liu Zhimao, was blind back then. I accept my punishment. Mr. Chen, please state your conditions. Chen Pinggan said, if I say I'll let bygones be bygones, you won't believe me, and I won't believe it either. Liu Zhimao laughed heartily and pushed out the white bowl. Just because of Mr. Chen's generous words, I'll ask for another bowl of wine. Chen Pinggan poured another bowl of wine for Liu Zhimao. It was almost half a bowl. Liu Zhimao drank it in one gulp. If the cultivators of Verdant Gorge Island saw this scene, they would probably think that it was a happy meeting between the host and the guest. Chen Pinggan said, "Before I state my conditions, I have something to ask you, perfected lord." Liu Zhimao nodded. "I'll tell you everything I know." Chen Pinggan asked, "Perfected lord, why do you cultivate your heart?" Liu Zhimao said without hesitation, "A Daoist cultivator seeks the truth." Chen Pinggan asked, "Can you tell me more about it? About your family's martial arts?" Liu Zhimao hesitated for a while but still answered, "The 7 emotions and 6 desires are a mess. Then I'll take a closer look at it and categorize it." Liu Zhimao pointed at the row of cabinets behind the desk. "Just like Mr. Chen, I'll store the different secret files." Liu Zhimao continued, "After that, the cultivators who chose to walk this unorthodox path of mine all had their own choices and paths to take. They can shrink to the size of a mustard seed and put it aside, or grow to the size of a mountain and stabilize it. These are all cultivation methods. As for how many mustard seeds can be condensed and how many mountains can be formed, that depends on each cultivator's talent and aptitude. There are many obstacles and obstacles. To deal with those mustard seeds, for example, you can derive the ancient art of killing 3 corpses and the art of internal alchemy. As for how to form a mountain, there's also the art of drinking dew and the art of external alchemy. The speed of cultivation and the level of the bottleneck depends on the quality of the ancestral cultivation methods." Liu Zhimao stopped here. "I can only go into detail up to this point. It involves the fundamental Great Tao. If I continue, that would be truly seeking death. I might as well let Mr. Chen stab me one more time." Liu Zhimao asked, "I know Mr. Chen already has a plan. Why don't you just say it?" Chen Pinggan smiled. "There's no hurry. I have another question. Liu Larocheng is the Oriole behind. He destroyed Verdant Gorge Island's hundreds of years of fame in the Book Lake, along with Little Loach. Can you still be the ruler of Jianghu? Will you spit out the fat meat in your mouth and give it to Liu Larocheng with both hands? Will you seal off more than 10 islands and become the ruler of Book Lake? Or will you take the risk? Liu Larocheng is the Oriole behind, and you still have Dallas Slingshot." Liu Zhimao did not answer directly, but sighed and felt wronged. He said helplessly, "I'm afraid that the great Li has now secretly turned to support Liu Larocheng. Without a backer, the Verdant Gorge Island is small and weak, and can't make any trouble. In Liu Laocheng's eyes, I, Liu Zhimao, am no better than those naked girls on the island. Not to mention taking off a few clothes, even peeling off my skin and pulling out my tendons is not difficult." Chen Pinggan smiled. "I heard that you're good at making tea and drinking cheap wine. I can't do that. I can't get used to drinking tea. I only know what's on paper." Liu Zhimao said bitterly, "I'll remember Mr. Chen's words." Chen Pinggan's smile faded. "You want to bury the hatchet between us? Sure, but you have to hand it over to me." Liu Zhimao shook his head. "No way. Mr. Chen, don't even think about it." Liu Zhimao smiled. "To be honest, she's just a half-human half-ghost girl from Zhuxian Mansion. Liu Larocheng took her away by force that night. Or like you, he asked me for it. Would I dare to refuse? But why didn't Liu Larocheng do that? Have you thought about it?" Chen Pinggan covered his sleeves with both hands. Opposite Liu Zhimao, in a place where spiritual energy was thin, there was a dilapidated statue of a deity whose paint had peeled off. Liu Zhimao asked curiously, "Even Ma Yuanji, the ghost cultivator of Zhuxian Mansion, doesn't know about this secret. How did you figure it out?" Chen Pinggan did not hide. "First, the origin of the name Zhuxian Mansion, then the name of a pot of wine." Liu Zhimao was even more puzzled. He addressed Chen Pinggan as Mr. Chen again. "Mr. Chen, please enlighten me." Chen Pinggan said slowly, "Ma Yuanji, the ghost cultivator of Zhuxian Mansion, had a special liking for Liu Zhongruan of Pearl Island. I heard him talk about his past. When he talked about Zhuxian Mansion, he was very proud. But he was unwilling to give me an answer. So I went to Pearl Island and used the name Zhuxian Mansion to test Liu Zhongruan. The female cultivator was immediately enraged. Although she did not reveal the truth, she called Ma Yuanji a shameless person. So I made a special trip to Kaishui City. In the name of buying ancient books on Ape Whaling Street, I asked a few old shopkeepers. Only then did I know that in Liu Zhongruan and Ma Jiyuan's homeland, there was a relatively rare poem called Zhongruan Sounds Juzian. That solved the mystery. Ma Yuanji was so proud of himself that he named his mansion Juzian, and the word sound was homophonic to think. Liu Zhimao clapped his hands and laughed. Wonderful. If Mr. Chen didn't reveal the mystery, I wouldn't have known that Ma Jiyuan, a lowly packman, had such an elegant mind. Chen Pinggan said, "Yellow vine wine, Palace Wall Willow. The official wine of Hongsu's hometown, Bookslip Lake, Palace Willow Island, and the lingering evil spirit on Hongsu's body. Under closer inspection, it's full of stubborn resentment and hatred. I don't even need to look through the secret records of Bookslip Lake. The love between Liu Larocheng and his disciple female cultivator ended without any illness, the latter's sudden death, and Liu Laocheng's departure from Bookslip Lake were all things that the world knew. Moreover, you, Liu Zhimao, are so cautious. Naturally, you know that the biggest opponent to become the master of Bookslip Lake is not the two islands of Qianlaro Qingzhong who have Grain Island as your and Dallas spies, but Liu Larocheng who has never shown up. You dare to compete for the throne of Jianghu. In addition to Dallas backing to help you gather the general trend, you must have some shady tricks that you can use to protect yourself and leave a way out. Once Liu Larocheng, a cultivator of the upper 5 states, returns to Bookslip Lake, he won't kill you at least." Liu Zhimao laughed heartily. What a bosom friend. He really couldn't imagine that in such a big Bookslip Lake, in the end, it turned out that such a young outsider was Liu Zhimao's bosom friend. Chen Pinggan looked a little tired. "I'll make half a request first. You must have done something to Jiyu Kan's Niang. Remove it. Now Jiyu Kan is no longer a threat to you, and your immediate emergency is how Liu Larocheng of Gongwillow Island can keep the throne of Jianghu. On Dallas' side, I'll try to help you secretly. At least, I won't let you be an abandoned pawn and become Liu Laocheng's road to the top." Liu Zhimao frowned and said, "Hongsu's life and death are still in my control." The young accountant with slightly sunken cheeks picked up the blade-strengthening gourd and drank a mouthful of wine. After coughing a few times, he said, What if Liu Larocheng is no longer the island master of Gongwillow Island? What if it involves his progress on the Great Way? Is Hongsu really so important? You couldn't let it go in the past. Are you sure you still can't let it go now? Maybe when the what if really comes, he will directly end Hongsu's life and then kill you who dared to touch Liu Laocheng's reverse scale with a punch. So, Liu Zhimao, you make your own choice. I'm just giving you a way to prevent the worst outcome from happening." Liu Zhimao asked a key question. "Mr. Chen, do you really have the ability to influence the decision-making of Dallas higher-ups?" Chen Pinggan nodded and said, "Yes, but it's limited. However, I can tell you clearly that the Song clan still owes me something." Liu Zhimao looked at the young man. All sorts of feelings welled up in his heart. Liu Zhimao put away the white bowl and stood up. "Give Mr. Chen a clear answer within 3 days." Chen Pinggan did not get up. "I hope that perfected Lord can seek the truth when it comes to the direction of the Great Way and your own life and death." The corner of Liu Zhimao's mouth twitched. "I will." After Liu Zhimao left, Chen Pinggan coughed non-stop. That night, he had forcefully controlled that sword immortal. There were endless hidden dangers. One of his natal acupuncture points was damaged, and it was undoubtedly one disaster after another. But this was nothing. Chen Pinggan was never afraid that one day he would become poor again and have nothing at home. But there were many subtle things that others did not care about, that little bit of loss. It would even make Chen Pinggan want to drink but not dare to. Chen Pinggan walked out of the house and passed through the mountain gate. He picked up some stones, squatted on the shore of the ferry, and threw them into the lake one by one. "Jiyu Kan, what I want is not that loach. It wasn't like this from the beginning. Otherwise, after you said those words in Mud Bottle Alley, I wouldn't have cared about Aunt's kindness of a meal. But I know that you know this, which is why you said those words. Because you have to get a definite answer from me so that you can be completely at ease when you are at your weakest. This was where Ji Yukan was smart, but also where Ji Yukan was not smart enough. This did not mean that Ji Yukan would do anything to Chen Pinggan. In fact, Chen Pinggan was still very important to Ji Yukan. It was under the premise that it did not involve her fundamental interests. Ji Yukan could be slapped twice or 20 times, and Ji Yukan would not fight back. The truth was very simple. Chen Pinggan had always been the straw sandal boy in Mud Bottle Alley, and Ji Yukan was actually still the child with the slug. But at that time, the straw sandal boy and the slug could only rely on each other. Moreover, they did not know their own hearts and the other's hearts. As the river of time slowly moved forward, people would meet and separate, and people's hearts would separate. What Chen Pinggan wanted was Ji Yukan or aunt. Even if it was just a casual question. Chen Pinggan, are you seriously injured? Are you okay? Chen Pinggan finished throwing the stones in his hand. Squatting there, he raised his head and gently exhaled. It was midwinter, and it was foggy. Chen Pinggan shrunk his shoulders, lowered his head, and cupped his palms, gently exhaling to warm them. On the Palace Willow Island that was the center of attention. Liu Larocheng had already spread the word to the entire Book Lake that no one was allowed to come within 1,000 feet of the island. No one dared to go beyond that. On this day, after Jiao Mian, who still had poor alcohol tolerance, fell into a deep sleep, only Zun Yuan and Liu Larocheng were left drinking in a dilapidated pavilion. To the Earth Immortals, in the eyes of ordinary people, what they cared about was longevity. They did not care about the heat and cold of the year. The two of them did not chat much. Zun Yuan suddenly laughed. It's about time to go back. Liu Larocheng nodded. Tongyi continent cannot do without Elder Zun. Zun Yuan shook his head. Jiao Mian will not think too much about it. He thinks that my trip to the Aquarius continent is for him. In fact, that is only half the case. You are different. Now that you are a member of the Jade Gui sect, I should be honest with you about some of the secrets. Liu Larocheng, who was like a god in the Book Lake, said in a deep voice, Elder Zun, please speak. Zun Yuan had given Zhu Lian a book about the fight between a scholar and a beauty in the dusty medicine shop in Old Dragon City. He was humble in front of Jiao Mian and was simply the little follower of the invincible Divine Fist Gang's old master. Zun Yuan had been enjoying it all the way. He was not faking it or scheming anything. But on Liu Laocheng's side, facing Zun Yuan, he looked up to him. Zun Yuan said softly, as for me, I actually have a great chance, but I don't want to ascend to the 13th realm. There are too many restrictions, unlike the current immortal realm. Even if the sky falls, the tall man will hold it up. For example, our Tongyi continent used to belong to the Tongyi sect and that Du Maro. But now, even if I don't want to admit it, I have to. As for why I don't take a step forward and ascend to the Ascendant Realm, I am not sure if it is right or wrong. You will know in the future. Zun Yuan twisted the wine cup in his hand, but I am the sect master of the Jade Gui sect after all, I still have to consider my family. Once Du Maro dies, his great Tao collapses and dissipates. It is not just the glazed golden body fragment that you, Liu Larocheng, snatched. There are also those mysterious and indescribable things, which are what we cultivators call fated chances. Therefore, how much Jiang Shangzhen can take from the fated chance that originally belonged to me and how much he can snatch from the hands of the cultivators of the Tongyi sect will depend on his ability and fortune. If Jiang Shangzhen really gains nothing and is chased to this calligraphy lake by me, Liu Larocheng, you will have to do more work and help this useless person. If Jiang Shangzhen is not bad, it will be a good thing. A Jade Gui sect located in the Aquarius continent, and two of them have a chance to reach the immortal realm. I believe that even the heavenly Lord Qi Zhen, the neighboring Lakeview Academy, or the Song clan will not dare to humiliate you. Liu Larocheng nodded. These were the truth. The reason why Liu Larocheng did not establish a sect in Calligraphy Lake was not as simple as being disheartened. The path was complicated and extremely dangerous. Moreover, it was very distracting and karmic. If he was not careful, he would delay or even obstruct his great Tao from reaching the top. Moreover, every time he ascended, whether it was his realm or cultivation, he would take another step forward. The thoughts of the people close to him would also be indescribable and unspeakable. Liu Laocheng had suffered greatly and suffered greatly. Back then, he had almost lost his life. The yellow vine wine was buried in the willows of the palace walls. It was an old account that was very old and muddled. Even Liu Laocheng, who had a heart of stone, was unwilling to mention it. If he had not thought it through thoroughly and the Jade Gui sect was located in Calligraphy Lake, Liu Laocheng would probably never return to this sad place in his life. The longer he spent with Zun Yuan, the more frightened Liu Laocheng became. This was not only because Zun Yuan was an experienced peak immortal realm cultivator. This was the intuition that allowed Liu Laocheng to survive danger after danger. Why didn't he kill Liu Zhimao, who was a smart person, and the young accountant? There was another reason that Liu Laocheng did not tell Jiao Mian and Zun Yuan. This was because it would make him very passive. If Liu Zhimao had something on him, it would not hurt him. However, if it was in Zun Yuan and Jiang Shangzhen's hands, Liu Laocheng would be skinned and dripping with blood. He would have to obediently endure it. Otherwise, they would completely fall out and both sides would suffer. After Liu Laocheng ascended to the upper 5 realms, he became quieter and quieter. It was only after a larger and more magnificent picture was spread out in front of him that he discovered a cruel truth that made him ponder deeply every time. The Battle of the Great Tao. It sounded very general. However, when a mountain and swamp cultivator with a high enough realm and vision lowered his head to look at the width of the road under his feet and then looked at the upper 5 realms at the same height, he would look at the road under his feet. It was a small and bumpy road, the difference between it and a main road. Did Liu Laocheng really not want to become the sect master of a large sect like Zun Yuan? Did he not want to be able to truly decide the direction of a continent? He had the will but was powerless to do so. Zun Yuan smiled as he looked at the Aquarius continent cultivator in front of him. Liu Laocheng in Zun Yuan's eyes. He was a person with luck and power. It was extremely rare. The extremely outstanding pure jade realm. Even Jiang Shangzhen, who was the best at fighting and had a powerful natal item, might not be his opponent. However, once he ascended to the 12th realm, the immortal realm, Jiang Shangzhen would be able to turn the tables. Therefore, Liu Laocheng was the head consecrator of the Jade Gui sect, which was just right. Jiang Shangzhen's temperament was not bad and had a bellyful of evil tricks. His roots were similar to Liu Laocheng. They were both natural mountain and swamp cultivators. The more chaotic the world was, the more they were like fish in water. Zun Yuan smiled and said, Liu Laocheng, relax. I will ensure that you ascend to the immortal realm safely and steadily. At that time, you will not be the one toasting me every time. If there is another drinking session, no matter how big or small, I will return the favor. Liu Laocheng raised his wine cup and smiled, then I will toast to Elder Zun again. Zun Yuan clinked their cups and drank. Naturally, Liu Laocheng was the first to drink, while Zun Yuan drank slowly. In a spacious room on the top floor of a tall building in Pondwater City, Kui Dongshan was about to walk out of the lightning pool several times, but he retracted his feet. He jumped and jumped, flapping his sleeves vigorously. He was like a big white goose flapping its wings randomly. In the misty Gong Willow Island, the landscape painting left behind by Kui Dong could no longer be seen. If the scholarly sage above the Aquarius continent wanted to see it, he could, of course, see it. However, under the premise that it did not involve major issues, such behavior was considered rude and even unreasonable. And this principle was so high that it became a rule of etiquette. It was the iron law that the Sage of Rites had set for the scholarly sage. It was a shackle that tied the scholarly sage's hands and feet. It was very fun. In fact, during the long years when the Confucian school oversaw the vast world, they had made many shocking secret plans. There were plans by the 100 schools of thought, by cultivators in the 12th and 13th realms, and even by demons, devils, ghosts, and spirits. Some of these plans died in the womb, but most of them caused great destruction and far-reaching consequences. However, this rule was unshakable and still firmly bound the people of the scholarly faction on the divine throne. Was it not inconceivable? The Sage of Rites was not the only one who was so unreasonable. The Baekho Kaekyung building and the Lotus Buddhist Kingdom also had a similar rule. Kui Dongshan stopped his actions and sat cross-legged in front of the chessboard again. His hands reached into the chess jar and randomly stirred it, making the two jars of colored cloud seeds clinking against each other. Even if Kui Dongshan could not see what happened on Gong Willow Island, he still had to praise Zun Yuan's words and actions that night. The older the ginger, the spicier it is. Liu Larocheng is still too inexperienced. Kui Dongshan took out a colored cloud seed and heavily knocked it on the chessboard. I've reminded Liu Larocheng. How to choose is not only a test of the mind of a lower sex consecrator, but also a favor to Liu Larocheng. But these are all small matters. Now that the territory of Calligraphy Lake is coming, it's a juicy piece of meat in the mouth of the great Li Iron Cavalry and a chicken rib of the Zhuang dynasty. The war that will decide the ownership of the central region of the Aquarius continent is on the verge of breaking out. Then, one of the 72 sages of the Central Plains Confucian Temple above us will definitely be watching without blinking. After all, Liu Larocheng was a wild cultivator. Even if he had intuition, he could still come into contact with the situation firsthand. In terms of transactions and undercurrents, he is far inferior to the Dali imperial tutor. Kui Dongshan stared at the chess piece and coldly laughed. Old Liu, so your understanding of Zun Yuan's shrewdness is still too shallow. At the peak of the vassal island, a few words were said. It was said to the real big shot behind the scenes. Some were direct, some were indirect. Kui Dongshan muttered to himself, firstly, Zun Yuan reminded you of Liu Larocheng. The meaning behind his words was, in fact, already biased. So, whether you kill Chen Pinggan or show mercy, you will be grateful to Zun Yuan. This is called human nature. Even if my master knows about the process, he might be grateful to Zun Yuan, who spoke up for justice. Kui Dongshan took out another chess piece and placed it on the chessboard. Secondly, if you don't kill my master, he, Zun Yuan, will be in a small place. He will be able to gain the favor of the literary sage, who is in a precarious situation and has almost no light. Even if the literary sage can see through people's hearts, the truth is there. He has to pinch his nose and admit it. This is the way of a gentleman. Scholars can't help it. Kui Dongshan took out another chess piece and casually threw it on the chessboard. Thirdly, it is the real big benefit. It is immeasurable. Zun Yuan said this to the sage above him who had dealings with him, and also to the sage who almost didn't even have a cold pig head meat to eat. As long as there is a battle of the great Tao, even if Zun Yuan knew that the tall woman standing behind Chen Pinggan was, he would still be killed. Kill him all the same. Do you really think that one of the 72 sages who handed over I'm good at nurturing Great Spirit Jade token is not angry? Of course, he is not angry at my master. On the contrary, this sage is very magnanimous. Otherwise, he would not have said such generous words in Old Dragon City. But the more this is the case, the more he, as one of the sages who supervise the hunting of the Aquarius continent, is dissatisfied with the woman who dared to use her sword and wanted to poke the biggest hole in the world. Even such a heroic figure is like this. Wouldn't that pitiful person who was sent to the Confucian temple to reflect on his mistakes be happier? Would he think more highly of Zun Yuan? It has always been extremely difficult for a higher sect to establish a lower sect. It is not a matter of money or whether one's fist is hard or not. It is just a matter of whether the Confucian Academy agrees or not. Kui Dongshan moved his gaze away from the chessboard and glanced at the blurry Gong Willow Island on the scroll. Liu Larocheng. In this way, how many sentences did Zun Yuan say? How many words? How much did the Jade Gui sect get in the end? Kui Dongshan slapped the chessboard, and 4 chess pieces flew up high before landing gently. Kui Dongshan clicked his tongue and said, "Is it useless for a cultivator to cultivate the heart?" Kui Dongshan waved his sleeves, and the 4 chess pieces flew out with a bang. He said angrily, "Damn it, including the old bastard, all of you quickly go burn incense and kowtow. Don't let my master overcome this heart tribulation. Otherwise, none of you will be able to escape." Calligraphy Lake, Zhengyang Mountain, Qingfeng City, Zhenwu Mountain, Tongyi sect, Jade Gui sect, Song clan, Beko Keikyang building. Kui Dongshan's voice became lower and lower. Finally, his expression became sluggish for a long time before he suddenly wailed, "The old bastard is right. My master has a lot of worries." After Zun Yuan quietly left Calligraphy Lake, he went directly to the sea and did not go to the southernmost old dragon city. He rode the wind and the sea to return to Tongyi continent. Liu Jimao and the island master of Grain Island visited Gong Willow Island together. Both of them stopped on the lake 3,000 feet away from the island. Liu Larocheng only saw the latter and told the former to get lost. In the tall building of Pond Water City, Kui Dongshan laughed loudly and rolled on the ground. After being happy, Kui Dongshan frowned again. He lay on the ground and crawled to the edge of the Golden Thunder Pool with the posture of a duck. He sighed. He was really caught in a trap of his own making. He had to find some entertainment to relieve his boredom. Kui Dongshan sat up and threw a chess piece on the chessboard to make a conclusion. He wanted to calculate how many people his master met had a good impression of him at first. Qi Jing-chun. Kui Dongshan threw 10 chess pieces on the chessboard and then rolled his eyes. "You have good taste, okay?" Then, he waved his sleeves and pushed the chess pieces out of the chessboard. Sword spirit. Kui Dongshan did not throw a single chess piece. He rolled his eyes again and muttered, "Qi Jing-chun is still the best, okay?" He only threw 6 chess pieces. Then, he pushed the chess pieces out of the chessboard. Old Yang. 1 chess piece. Alliance. 5 chess pieces. Kui Dongshan thought for a moment. "When we reach Red Candle Town." He added another 4 chess pieces. Left and right. 3 chess pieces. For Qi Jingchuan's face, he added 3 more chess pieces. Wei Jin. No. Ruan Cheng. 2 chess pieces. Kui Dongshan counted almost all the people Chen Pinggan knew on the chessboard. Finally, Kui Dongshan suddenly flew into a rage, remembering that he had missed the most annoying guy. "The most heartless old scholar, you're the one who likes to side with others." He picked up a whole chess jar with both hands and poured it on the chessboard. Kui Dongshan frowned, put away the landscape painting, and put all the chess pieces back into the jar. He said in a low voice, "Come in." The owners of this tall building, the lord of Pond Water City fan couple, and the silly son Fan Yang, walked into the house one after another. Fan Yang bowed and followed behind his parents with fear and trepidation. There were no chairs or stools in the house. Kui Dongshan was sitting, and the 3 of them could not stand and talk. They could only follow Kui Dongshan and sit in the distance, of course in a kneeling posture. Kui Dongshan yawned. The Fan family of Pond Water City used to be two-faced spies, selling intelligence between the Song clan and the Zhuiying dynasty. As for the authenticity of each spy report, it depended on whether the chief spy of Dallas Greenwave Pavilion, who was in charge of Book Lake, offered a higher price and had better means of controlling people's hearts, or the idiots of the Zhuiying dynasty. It turned out that the Lord of Grain Island was much smarter than the spy in the Zhuiying dynasty. In the end, the Fan family of Pond Water City chose to completely rely on the Dali cavalry. The husband of the Lord of Pond Water City did not say anything. Instead, it was the mistress of the Fan family, who was said to only know how to spend money and spoil her son, who told him the situation of Book Lake and the border army of the Zhuiying dynasty in an orderly manner. Kui Dongshan was expressionless. The woman did not dare to be negligent. Because before he left, the imperial tutor of Dali left behind a very important message, regarding the young man on the roof as the left and right assistant minister of Dali's 6 departments. After a discussion with her husband, the woman came to a conclusion. The guy on the roof should be at least an earth immortal cultivator of Dali, or a direct descendant of some pillar state. The woman glanced at her husband beside her. The Lord of Pond Water City quickly stood up, bent over, and walked to the edge of the strange and mysterious Golden Thunder Pool. He lowered his head and stretched out his hand, handing over a secret letter from the imperial tutor of Dali to the Fan family. He said softly, "The imperial tutor told me to take out this letter if you still haven't come out of the top floor today." Kui Dongshan waved his hand, grabbed the secret letter, tore open the envelope, and threw it away. After he opened the letter, his face darkened. This scene made Mr. and Mrs. Fan's eyelids twitch. How dare he treat a secret letter from the imperial tutor of Dali like this? If the couple had such an honor, they would have enshrined it as an imperial edict. Kui Dongshan rolled the letter into a ball, held it in his hand, and cursed. The content of the letter was, "I said you were forgetful, so you were not convinced. What about now? This circle was drawn by you, Kui Dongshan. Did I compete with you on this matter? In the end, I told you that you crossed the thunder pool and did not follow the rules, so I targeted you. Then, you left the circle and followed the rules. What can I do? You were the one who went into a dead end, drawing a circle without knowing it. How are you different from Chen Pinggan? Chen Pinggan can't get out. You didn't become a disciple in vain. Family members would not enter the same house. When did you fall to the point where you need a thunder pool to follow the rules? Since you are so pitiful, I will give you this letter. Eat it. If you are not full, you can ask the Fan family for more. Kui Dongshan really stuffed the paper into his mouth, chewed it, and swallowed it. Oh, it tasted like rice paper. It was quite delicious. Kui Dongshan shook his head and pointed behind the couple who continued to kneel side by side. Fan Yang, right? Come out. Is it fun to pretend to be stupid? Tell me, what do you think of Ji Kan, that fool? The tall youth stood up and bowed. Then, he took a step forward and sat in a row with his parents. His parents were clearly nervous and even a little afraid of their stupid son. Fan Yang's expression was calm. He looked directly at the white-clothed youth with a mole between his eyebrows. He did not have any stage fright and smiled. That Ji Kan is very simple. He just needs to act a little stupid, have deep feelings for his parents, be a little naive, and be willing to suffer hardships. Over time, hide it well and control it well. That child will believe him. I was just waiting for someone who could afford to sell him. I didn't expect Liu Larocheng to cause me to lose a lot of money. I have no place to complain. Kui Dongshan smiled. Smart man. Fan Yang said, unfortunately, he doesn't have great wisdom. Kui Dongshan was amused and asked, you really think so? Fan Yang was slightly stunned. Kui Dongshan stood up and put his hands behind his back. He walked to the edge of the golden lightning pool and looked down at the young man. If you want to live high and mighty, you have to be able to endure both good and bad. If you want to live an easy life, you can either pretend to be stupid or be really stupid. Fan Yang, which one do you think you are? Think about it slowly. If you get it wrong, tomorrow, the City Lord's mansion will hold a funeral for the white-haired person. Oh, sorry, the City Lord and his wife look young. Fan Yang's face was pale. Kui Dongshan looked at him with a smile. Unexpectedly, Fan Yang suddenly smiled and no longer had any fear. Kui Dongshan tilted his head and coldly stared at Fan Yang, who had played with Ji Kan's mind. Is it that old bastard who told you not to worry about me venting my anger on you? You won't die. Then do you know what he's thinking? You can't even guess this and don't even know who I am. Who gave you the courage to talk to me like this? It was only at this moment that Fan Yang started to get nervous. Kui Dongshan sneered. There's no doubt that Dali will take over Bookslip Lake. A spy like you who resells information is indeed useful to Dali, and you've made great contributions. We've given you all the benefits you deserve. However, do you really think that Dallas Greenwave Pavilion has no records of your Fan family's secret dealings with Zhuang dynasty? What makes you think you have a life-saving talisman? Your face. When Xiao Chen stepped out of the golden lightning pool, the entire building shook violently. A nascent soul cultivator, Kui Dongshan walked in front of Fan Yang and stuck two fingers together. He looked down at him and sneered. I'll even dirty my hands by killing a piece of trash like you. How dare you King show off your cleverness in front of me? Kui Dongshan turned his head towards the door and spat. Old bastard, I know what you're thinking. You're letting this little bastard provoke the heavenly lightning fury that I've been accumulating, so that I can help you kill that Realm 9 sword Xiao of the Zhuang dynasty, right? Kui Dongshan looked at the trembling couple and said sternly, you've raised such a piece of trash. Go, you parents, teach your son well. It's never too late to mend the pen after the sheep are lost. First, give a dozen or 20 slaps. Remember to be loud, or I'll kill the 3 of you with 1 slap. Don't you King Book Slip Lake like to have a family reunion, both above and below ground? You guys are addicted to these dirty rules that can't even be brought to the table. Slaps sounded in the room. It was much better than the sound of chess pieces rubbing against each other. Kui Dongshan was finally in a good mood. Kui Dongshan walked out of the room and came to the railing of the corridor. His expression was bleak. Jiyu Kan, oh Jiyu Kan, do you really think you're so powerful? Do you really know how cruel this world is? Do you really know what Chen Pinggan relied on to survive until today? You're destined to not survive in Bookslip Lake even with that little loach. Who gave you the courage to think that you can go far on that path? Did your master, Liu Zhimao, teach you? Did your mother teach you? Do you know how much my husband has sacrificed for you? At dusk, Chen Pinggan carried the jug of yellow vine wine that had been placed close to him and strolled to the entrance of the Zhuxian mansion. Hongsu smiled and walked out of the side room. She reached out to greet him. Mr. Chen. Chen Pinggan and she sat together on the threshold, just like the other day when they were listening to stories and writing stories. Hongsu's eyes were shining. She turned around and gave him a thumbs up. Mr. Chen, this. Chen Pinggan's eyes were dark. His lips moved slightly, but he still couldn't tell the truth that would cut a woman's heart. The world was never simple. Telling the truth and doing good deeds didn't guarantee the best results. At least Hongsu's life was not in danger now. Would she be able to live a better life after knowing the truth? Would she not live in fear all the time? In this life, Hongsu was, after all, a soft-hearted and kind-hearted woman. When she saw the bookkeeper, he seemed a little sad. She misunderstood and mistakenly thought that Mr. Chen had been seriously injured in the tumultuous and soul-stirring battle. Therefore, compared to the last time they met, he looked even more dispirited. Besides, there was such a domineering and unrivaled enemy who was now on Gong Willow Island and keeping an eye on Verdant Gorge Island. Therefore, Mr. Chen must be worried about his future. Chen Pinggan raised the jug of yellow vine wine given by Hongsu and forced a smile. I couldn't bear to drink it before. Do you have a cup and a bowl? Let's drink your hometown's extra meal wine. Hongsu was ashamed. There's only 1 bowl. She asked, do you want me to go to your house and ask for a wine set? Chen Pinggan smiled. No need. You can use the bowl. I'll drink directly from the jug. Hongsu was full of smiles. With light steps, she went to the dark side room and brought back a white bowl. After she sat down, Chen Pinggan had already opened the yellow paper and clay seal. He turned sideways and poured some wine for Hongsu. Hongsu's expression was strange as she tried to hold back her laughter. This Mr. Chen, really, poured so little wine for her. A white bowl that weighed 1 or 2 grams, and then it was only 1.5 grams. This wine was given to him by her, Sai. He looked at her, then looked at the bowl and poured more wine. Hongsu finally couldn't hold it in. She held the bowl with one hand and covered her mouth with the other. Her unstoppable laughter seeped through her fingers. Chen Pinggan also laughed. This time, he finally filled her bowl to the brim. Hongsu's bright eyes narrowed into crescents. She held the white bowl with both hands and sipped the wine. Chen Pinggan raised his head and drank a mouthful of yellow vine wine. The two didn't chat much. Hongsu was curious. Such a good Mr. Chen. Last time when she jokingly asked, he nodded shyly. Where was that girl now? If he saw such a lonely Mr. Chen, he would feel sorry for him, right? Chen Pinggan took a sip of wine and looked into the distance. He said softly, Hongsu, we're friends, right? Hongsu nodded vigorously. Chen Pinggan grunted, as if he was talking to her, but also to himself. So, no matter what happens in the future, don't be afraid. No matter how big the matter is, quickly remember one thing. At the mountain gate, there's a bookkeeper surnamed Chen. He's your friend. Hongsu was a little baffled, but she was still very happy. She quietly turned her head to look. The accountant beside her had unknowingly changed into a thick green cotton coat as the winter chill grew heavier. 10. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.